discuss?
Well, Your Honor, I wanted to briefly discuss scheduling so that we can get an idea of when we're going to finish and how.
Or if?
Yes. We want to put on the September 17th statement of Eric Menendez now in front of his jury only. Mr. Brunon said he'll be here at 10. When the other jury's here, I was going to put him on. I discussed with counsel what I'm going to ask him. I believe Ms. Abramson has some objections. I don't know if Ms. Lansing does, but I told her. So that might require a brief hearing. Then we want to play the September 17th statement of Lyle Menendez to his jury only. At that point, I think we need to have some 402 issues resolved. In addition, we have another piece of evidence which we have told the defense about this morning that we wanted to play for the jury. And we have to check the transcript because it was my memory that this would only apply to the jury for Eric Menendez. But it appears that from the notes of Dr. O'Deal that it might apply to both defendants. And what it is it's portions of a television show which was displayed on July the 30th and 31st of 1989, dealing with the BBC, which is not the British Broadcasting Corporation, but in fact is the Billionaire Boys Club. And he wanted to, I believe the defense is going to have a 402 on, it's going to want to have a 402 on this. In addition, I believe that we have Ms. McPhee to deal with today. So it seems to me that we might not be engaged this afternoon with the jury, but I wanted to ask the court's feelings about this, and I think the record should show, I guess Ms. Lansing's here now, so she could participate in the scheduling discussion.
Well, in regards to this tape recording, is this an audio tape or videotape?
It's a video
movie.
It's a movie.
Two-part mini-series that runs.
Well, okay, one person present this, and this is being presented by the prosecution, so let me hear what you have to say.
Yes, Your Honor, it was a two-part mini-series that I believe runs approximately an hour and a half in length. However, the part of the tape that is pertinent, we feel, to this case, runs for approximately 1/2 hour. And if you want an offer of proof as to what we'll show and why we feel it's relevant, Mr. Karam is ready to do that. However, before we do that, I think that we have to determine whether or not the BBC movie was mentioned in front of the jury for Lyle Menendez.
Excuse me, Your Honor, since this issue obviously involves my.
We're not litigating anything, we're just talking about scheduling of
Okay,
hearing.
and it's Mr. Burt's witness, so, and he was under the impression that he wasn't needed to kind of.
Yeah, nothing is being resolved here. I'm just being presented with suggestions by the parties as far as when to schedule a hearing at this point.
Your Honor, leaving the 402 hearings aside for a moment, after the two tapes are played and Mr. Brunon testifies, the only other witnesses we would have would be somebody from the Hotel Zoeller, someone from the Marina City Club, assuming the court rules in our favor, Mr. Mark Heffernan, and then Detective Zoeller. Now, Detective Zoeller is going to need to testify in front of both juries, and in addition, in front of the jury for Eric Menendez, and I think that testimony in front of the Eric Menendez jury will take up some period of time. In going over my notes, I found one fact that I need to present to the jury for Lyle Menendez alone, but it's very brief, and it's something to do with only issues that his jury should hear about. So I wanted the court to understand what it is that we need to do. And we wanted to finish with Detective Zoeller in front of both juries so that we could rest in front of both juries simultaneously, if that can be achieved.
Regarding Heffernan, is there any hearing required before he testifies?
I believe that there are issues that Ms. Lansing has raised with us that I don't think we've been able to resolve. And I don't know does Eric Menendez?
Yes.
All right. So,
And
yeah.
is that, how long is it expected that hearing would take?
Your Honor, with respect to Mr. Heffernan, I think that I can speak to Ms. Nancy and Ms. Morrissey about that. I don't think it will require a hearing.
All right, and he is available today?
No, we have him for tomorrow.
And the Bel Air Hotel and
Marina City Club?
those are scheduled for tomorrow?
Yes, they're on call for tomorrow morning, pending the court's ruling on the 402 issues.
All right.
Your Honor, we also have a witness that we need to present on those issues who is an attorney who was in trial in Judge Beverly's court in Torrance. I plan to call there at about 10:30. He thinks he might be available later today or tomorrow, but we have to ascertain his availability. later this morning.
All right,
I indicated I might be willing to stipulate for what he has to say.
well then, why don't you see if you can resolve that? If you cannot, then at this point, it seems that perhaps we can have his testimony this afternoon.
So it appears that perhaps we're going to need the afternoon to litigate these issues so we can complete.
Well, I don't know how long this litigation would take, but what you're saying is that you don't have witnesses other than playing of 2 tape recordings and Detective Zoeller and Mr. Brunon,
Correct.
and nothing else is available today.
That's correct.
Okay.
However, we don't know how the court's going to rule on the 402 issues, at least as to the Marina City Club and the Hotel Bel Air.
Yeah, well, that wouldn't be available until tomorrow anyway, since witnesses aren't here until tomorrow.
Right.
Well, as far as what we do with the jury, we'll just see how much progress we make with the playing of the 2 audio tapes of the defendant's interviews in New Jersey, and how long it takes for Mr. Brunon's testimony. And then we'll evaluate the situation.
Can I be heard now?
Yes.
First of all, I think it's, we would object to even having a 402 hearing on this portion of the Billionaires Boys Club.
Well, I'm not going to even deal with that now because it's really nothing to discuss. So right now, we have a jury that's sitting in the jury room. I assume we have all the jurors here.
The court is
And
not gonna let me make a record.
a record for what? Is this a scheduling record? Do you have
No,
some
not a scheduling
appellate rights on scheduling?
I
I
have
have
a
a hearing.
discovery record. This is the first we've heard. I've never seen that many series. I have no idea what portion they propose to play. How can I respond to a 402? I've never seen it.
All right, then between now and the time it's heard, you can see it.
Well, I suppose if people want to give me a copy and I can get to a VCR and I have an hour and a half between now and the time we do the 402, I can do that. But I think it's incredible that they first bring this up now.
All right,
We also have an objection to Mr. Brunon testifying at all because it was revealed to us today by Mrs. Kazanich and apparently revealed to her today that Mr. Brunon has been holding on to a tape recording of some kind from Dr. Oziel. And we would like an opportunity, since we think there may be privilege issues, to hear that tape recording before Mr. Brunon testifies.
all right, that certainly would be appropriate if that tape is going to be referred to. Anyway,
All right, Your Honor. I don't think he's going to bring the tape. I don't think he listened to it, but I'm sure we can take testimony. I found out last night that I asked him if he'd been given a key to a safety deposit box. He said no. He believes he was given a tape, but it's in an envelope in a safe, and he has not heard it.
you don't know anything about the contents of the tape,
No,
what's on it?
no.
He doesn't?
No, he told me he doesn't know what's on it either.
And is there some reason why he did not bring it to court?
I told him to wait until we talked to the defense and stop, to see what they wanted to do about it, because I don't know what's on it, and I just thought it was better off being in the safe until I disclosed to the defense, but.
Why don't you turn on your microphones, counsel, number one, and number two, it seems to me that if he has this tape, it has some relevance to this case, then it should be produced.
All right,
Unless, he is asserting some privilege on behalf of his client.
Okay, I'll go call his office right now, if you don't mind starting without me, and see if they can get him to bring it, because he won't be here till 10.
And
I wasn't gonna ask for him to talk about it, about the contents or anything else, just that he was given something.
well, it's unclear at this point what the tape is, why it was given to him, or what's on the tape. It seems that it might have some bearing on this case. We don't know at this point, so it certainly should be explored.
All right, I'll go call his office.
All right, are we ready with the jury? We have all jurors present. Okay, is there anything that prevents us from going forward with the testimony of Detective Zoeller and playing of the tape recording of the interview with Eric Menendez?
No, Your Honor, we could do that.
How long is this tape recording?
It's about 40 minutes, Your Honor.
All right, then we'll take a momentary break, at which time we'll have the jurors come out and we'll proceed with the testimony. In the case of People versus Eric Menendez, he is in court with his attorneys. The people are represented. The jury is in the jury box. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. And we're ready to proceed with the next witness. And this, again, is only in relationship to the case of People versus Eric Menendez. The people may call their next witness.
People call Detective Les Zoeller.
You solemnly swear that the testimony you give in the cause not taken before the court shall be true to the truth.
I do.
You take a stand and state your name for the record.
Leslie H. Zoeller, Zoeller.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, I have an audio tape. May I have this marked as Exhibit 128? It purports to be an interview with Eric Menendez.
129.
So I was through 128 yesterday. Your Honor.
Well, it was marked, as I recall.
It was. I was about to mark it and ask for correction.
All right, then we'll make this 128.
Thank you, Your Honor. And I have a transcript of this tape. May I have that marked as Exhibit 129?
129.
There has been a transcript that's been prepared, Your Honor, and since has copies of it. When I pass them out to the jurors.
Yes.
Detective Zoeller, drawing your attention to September 17th, 1989, were you in Cranberry, New Jersey on the Menendez murder investigation?
Yes, I was.
And in the afternoon, did you interview Eric Menendez?
Yes.
Do you counsel stipulate that the court reporter does not have to transcribe the tape?
Yes. Just to play.
All right, let's go back, just again, the date that this interview took place.
This is September 17th.
Let's have it from the witness.
September 17th of 1989.
Yeah, where?
It's in Cranberry, New Jersey,
Where?
at the residence of Terry and Carlos Barral.
And can we have a foundation, Mr. Creole, as to who was present during this conversation?
Yes, Your Honor. During this interview, who was present in the actual room in which you were conducting this interview?
It's my partner, Detective Thomas Lenahan, Eric Menendez, and myself.
Was it in a residence?
It was in a residence, that's correct.
Were there other people at the residence?
Yes.
Can you hear other people conversing in the background?
At some portions, yes.
And who would those people be?
It was Carlos and Terry Baralt, and at different times, different people. I don't know exactly who was in the house.
In this conversation, was Eric Menendez in custody?
He was not.
May I play the tape, Your Honor?
How long is this tape recording? Approximately.
The interview was approximately an hour.
All right, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective Zoeller, is this an edited version of that tape?
Objection, Your Honor.
Objection sustained. You know, we can discuss that later on, Mr. Creole.
Very well.
Cranberry, New Jersey, speaking to Eric Menendez. It's now 4:20 a.m. on September 17th, 1989,
Actually, PM.
or PM rather. And Detective Zoeller is also present in order to be conducting an interview now with Eric.
What we're doing with this investigation, we're finding out everything that we can about your mother and your father. And obviously that involves you and Lyle. So we talked to a lot of your friends. We talked to Craig Signorelli, I'm sure you know him, and some other of your Cal Bass's friends. We talked to Lyle's friends.
Robin, if you can tell me exactly. Not that I'm I just want to know.
Dr. Robin.
Dr. Robin. And talk to Becky.
And about that, yeah.
I know that, that would be close to.
A lot of people that we want to talk to that we haven't yet, which we probably will, have left for school. So, as far as, we talked to a couple of your tennis coaches.
Hobie.
Talked to Hobie, we talked to,
Craig Heinrich.
yes,
And,
the guy that,
Gmail.
who?
Gmail.
No,
Gmail.
who was the tennis coach at the,
Dr. Whitcomb. Deputy Arnaz. Deputy McBride.
no, the guy,
Doug.
Doug Doss.
Doug Doss.
Yeah, that's the guy.
Okay, yeah. One of the two coaches were Dr. Whitline. And Gmail. Just Gene. Right.
But, you know, that's why we're doing that. So if people come and say, hey, the police worker, they're talking about you. Well, we're talking to them about you because they don't know your dad. You know, they can get some insight from you. You know, and we get little pieces from everybody we talk to. You know, we're not expecting to get a whole ton of information from Doug Doss.
Did you talk to Casey Weber?
No. That's all I have is his phone number. I just
But I don't know what his contact is.
And everybody we've spoken to says, oh, we don't know anything, but every time we speak to somebody, there's just a little bit something that we didn't know before.
And that's all we're after.
That's all we're.
So if you hear somebody say something, you know, we're hoping, we're going to be very honest with you. And we're hoping that you're going to be very honest with us. And that we have a good enough rapport back and forth with each other that if you have a question for us, you can call us directly at any time. And expect us to, if we're not at the phone, to get back to you, which we will. And, you know, we're going to do the same for you. But we want to have that rapport with you because we're not on the opposite side of you. You know, we're dealing basically not for you, but you know, we're on your side. Yeah, we're not trying to nail you or anybody. You know, that's not our purpose. Although we're the police, and a lot of times, you know, people that aren't police think that the police are, you know, the jerks or whatever. So that we don't want here. You know, generally we are, but this time we're not going to be with you. We may be with somebody else. So, you know, we want to be honest with you, and we want you to be honest with us. So, and that's where we're coming from. And as we said, if you hear that we interviewed somebody or talked to somebody, you go, well, what in the world are they talking to them about?
You can talk to whoever you want.
Yeah.
Some people, like Craig and my dad didn't talk before. What with each other, but
Yes.
I didn't.
Well, we take every conversation we have to bring us all, because we realize that people aren't with certain people because of reasons.
Yeah, generally we hear the same thing a couple of times, which reinforces. Now, if you have a problem with some guy, he says one thing about you, what's going to be contrary to everything else? So let's, you know, we'll pick the good out of that conversation. So that's, you know, don't worry about that. We go, when we investigate a case and when we file a case and when we prosecute a case, we can't go with innuendos. We have to go with the facts, basically. So that's what we are. You know, a lot of things that we're going to talk to you about are questions that came up at the crime scene, things that you did, that Lyle did. We know it's gonna be hard. We're gonna ask questions that are really gonna be hard for you, as far as the, relating back to that night. And we apologize ahead of time. We don't do it purposely to drag you through the coals to have you go through this again, so that's not our purpose at all. So we have to say we apologize ahead of time. And it has to be done. You went fishing that the day before also? You all went out at daybreak? What time did you come back that night?
Wait, there was a night, midnight? No, I think probably somewhere between 9 and 10, so. Shark fishing. Shark fishing? Yeah. Yeah, cool boy. Shark fishing before? We left it, yeah, not shark fishing. We left at like 4 or something. So it was a segment. We talked about it.
Had your dad like fishing?
Well, it was his idea.
Yeah, we heard why it was his idea, which we'll share with you in a second.
He was, I guess it was kind of boring. He caught one shark and he was pretty excited.
Who caught it?
Oh, well, we had different fishing lines. And you just set them up and you wait. You basically don't reel anything, and if they're fishing line, you just wait. The sharks come to you. He was kind of anxious to get out of there after the game because it's 40, so.
We heard that your dad wanted to go fishing to learn because of the client that he had. And he wanted to learn so he could get on the good side.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sorry, this was something that was thought about months before, and knew the time was coming close and gonna ask the question.
Yeah. So yeah, I wanted to learn that for the phone. Exactly. They went deep sea fishing once before.
Oh, that's the one that's up on the wall?
Yeah.
Okay.
My mom caught that and my dad had that.
I think I.
Big fish.
I thought we had bought or something.
No, they caught that. They had all the pictures of them.
And,
A pair of jeans. I have let's see that. A hole here comes out back here, and a hole here comes out back here. Almost like a bullet hole or something.
where's this at?
Change your hair.
Where were they there?
I don't know. I'm wondering if possibly they've been in the room.
Where did you get them from?
They're my jeans, and I don't remember. I guess they were.
Before we go, get them.
They're upstairs. Yeah. And I don't know. I don't remember where they came from. It didn't occur to me. I mean, I was wearing them, and I was just once when I was wearing them, I realized that I had a hole on top.
Yeah.
And then one time I was just massaging the bottom of my thigh, and I realized there was a hole in the bottom. And I checked in the exact same hole. Could have been the ginger folded that we went through, or I don't know.
Yeah, let's look at it before we go. Your parents normally get up same time on the weekends? As far as 9, 10 o'clock, or 7, 8 o'clock?
Well, no, my mom usually gets up early. My dad usually went over there. We were basically playing tennis all summer. So it wasn't a set schedule in the summer. Usually it's different because in the law or traveling on tennis. And my dad usually is a late riser every morning. Although I'm even later.
Yeah.
So, I like to get my sleep. So, yeah, usually my mom's up though. Usually my mom's up early and my dad's up late.
You still get up in the morning?
Oh yeah, no. He gets up probably like by 10 or 11. He doesn't sleep till. Maybe he's just sleeping.
They have a habit of falling asleep in front of the television downstairs.
No. Well, my mom would. My dad would be up. Actually, they would. Well, they'd fall asleep, but only for like maybe an hour. Usually my dad would be up watching a movie, and my mom would fall asleep in his lap. Or my mom would be up watching a movie, and my dad would fall asleep in the chair. But then, as soon as the movie was over, I mean, they wouldn't like fall asleep and wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
They may fall asleep until the end of the movie, in which case they'd get up. Yeah, but I guess one of them might get up. But not really. I gotta wake up at 6 in the morning. So.
Now, would they normally sit on their couch?
Where we found them, at least where we found my dad.
That would be consistent with it.
Yeah, that's where he was when we left the group. That's where he was watching TV all day. And my mom was usually right next to him. She was like,
Let's just run through this real quick and we're done with it. You both entered the house that night through the front door.
yeah.
And you went directly into the family room?
Well, yeah, I usually do. I was actually in the kitchen. I believe my brother ran upstairs when they came down and they heard me. There was a lot of smoke in the room. There was basically just, I don't know, I guess it wasn't a shock. There was basically just a lot of blood everywhere.
So you went in, did you go through?
When I walked in the door, the front door,
Yeah.
and I just walked straight.
Walk straight into the den and you would go to the kitchen?
Yeah. And I guess maybe one of the reasons that I walked straight in there is because the TV was on. And sometimes they're up late, but usually when they're up late and they're going to watch TV, a lot of times they go and watch in the bedroom. But they locked in the door in the bedroom. Actually, I guess I just kept it closed. And so it was late when we came home, and so probably see if they were upstairs to sleep or if they were still in there. The TV wasn't loud. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I take it when the police went in there.
I didn't touch the TV.
Okay. So it's
And from what I remember, I mean, I thought about it 3 million times over my mind. It wasn't loud. Did you watch the TV?
Yeah. Seemed loud to me.
Seemed like okay, maybe it just didn't seem like to me.
The smoke that you,
It seemed like it'd been lowered.
That's a loud in the middle of the turn anyway. If it's loud, it might not be good. So
That's true.
that's what you're used to. Did the smoke that you smelled when you came in, what did it smell like to you? Like your dad's pipe smoke?
No, I've been getting I have this thing where I smell smoke every day. When I smell the burning of the car engine, there's been overheated. It reminds me of the smoke. Every day I remind of the smoke, and probably for a long time it will be. And it was just, I remember it was like like keys was sitting there for a number. It smelled like, it immediately smelled to me like gun smoke from obviously when I saw it. But,
You know what kind of smoke smells like?
well, I never really smelled it before. I do it. It, you know, I never really approached him like that. I didn't have some points, but, no, what do you mean? I just assumed that.
You would presume you guys know what it smells like.
Yeah,
It was something that was a foreign smell to you rather than.
it fit. It fit. I walked in the room, I saw them shot. I just assumed that it was that smoke. Yeah.
How far into the room did you get, and how close to your parents did you get?
I saw them as soon as I walked in the room before the coffee table. And I was there, it seemed like a long while before Lyle got there. So I had a chance to get there.
You walked almost straight up to the coffee table.
Oh yeah, I walked behind the sofa. I looked at him. I was like, I wasn't like I didn't throw up, and I usually don't throw up unless I'm sick. And I was just, I guess, in such shock that I wasn't crying at first. I was calling for my brother, but I wasn't going to. He didn't call me down sobbing. So I was just, I guess, too much in a shock. I didn't even think that someone else could be still in the house or anything. But it didn't want to occur in my mind. I just couldn't believe that they were like, actually, they didn't look real. They basically looked, I mean, I've never seen it really. When my grandmother died in front of me, basically, in an airplane, two seats facing each other, she had a heart attack in front of me. And
How old were you?
that was 3 years ago, I think. So I guess I was 15. And that was pretty hard, especially when I took out the time in the room. So but there was no blood involved. And they didn't look real. Like I remember one thing distinctly, like my dad was shot through the left thigh. And so I was wondering what kind of gun. Because, but then, you know, I talked to security guards about it. So I've been dealing with security guards for some time. And it was just, it wasn't, that's just no sustainable.
And then Lyle came in, and he took you out of the room. And you both went upstairs?
Yeah, Lyle went upstairs to my parents' room, and I called my coach in my room. Well, I guess he was the closest person I've been to. Besides my brother. He had basically, you know, been my best friend because he's with us every day. And he was incredible. I assume you talked to me. Yeah, Mark. Yeah, I did. And Lyle said we gotta go outside. I don't know if people were running and told me to go outside. He said, well, I never haven't really trusted that. Really. I don't know. But Yeah, then you're outside the police for that. I have a question on one of the next. Glad we didn't talk in the first 2 weeks because I didn't have been able to discuss this. That's been one thing. If I would have gone and gotten the gun when her bedroom going, and I walked outside of the house with the gun, which maybe would have been a different state of mind or something. I mean, a gun is what is it? What if you're still outside the house or something like that? What would the police done?
Hope they dropped the gun.
They wouldn't have just shot them.
No. Not after receiving the call from mine. Then the police telling me to come out. And I'm sure you wouldn't come up pointing at it.
No, well, they didn't talk to them. We walked outside the house. Maybe 911 told us.
I don't know.
Yeah, okay, so I was just curious.
Unfortunately, not necessarily that type of crime, but when our residents in that city hear noises or something, they set off their alarm, or they call the police in and call and respond to. Oftentimes, these people come out of the house. It's not uncommon.
It's not uncommon, but it would have been a little bit uncommon because of the night.
Yeah.
Yeah. They knew kind of what they were going into when they got there. They knew where it was and where it was.
Yeah, I was just,
When, you know that cordless phone that's usually kept in the bar?
it's missing.
Oh, we have it. Yeah. Oh, where does the cord, I'm saying that, where does the hand part, the receiver part, cap? You know? In the house?
Yeah, the one where you're talking to. Right, that's what's missing.
Yeah, you know where that's usually kept?
On the thing? Or right around that area.
Okay. Would it seem normal to keep it, you know, with the L-shaped couches and the end closest to the bar? We have pillows all around it. It's under a pillow right in the corner.
Like where you're sitting there, that pillow would be
Yeah. Under that pillow.
Under it?
Yeah. You know why? That's why we took it, because we took it for fingerprints. Thinking that somebody might have used it. Made a call. I don't know. It's not uncommon. It's not out of the realm of possibility. I'll put it that way. It's not all that common.
I don't know why I didn't hear it. Maybe it's falling there earlier, but I remember that.
Did your mom's have it to have it, or your dad's have it?
Yeah, often they would
Have it close, don't they?
Yeah. So often they may have had it on the coffee table or on the table behind in the corner.
Yeah.
They might have it there. Most of the time it's kept on the receiver. Maybe if they were watching TV, they could have gotten a phone call. And they were supposed to order, they said they were going to order Chinese food. So possibly that's going to was it far away from them or is it right next to them?
Well, you know where the L-shaped couch, it was on this end where your dad usually sits.
It was
all
right
the way
next
to,
to them. Oh, it was all the way
to the other side, close to the bar.
Underneath the door?
Yeah, it was the bar, and that's the only way.
So that was the beginning. I don't know what they want to do that.
That's not funny. It didn't make any sense, that either.
Well, which I don't know what that, unless it maybe slipped.
I think the way to tell was it was purposely kept under that pillow.
I mean, the pillow's like the top of it.
Yeah. We have that.
Yeah, I've been thinking about it a lot. And the gate was open, the alarm was off, the door was unlocked. Yeah, it could have been some of it.
While all indications of us going into the room with the experience that he and I have is that it's somebody they moved because it doesn't appear either one of your parents. One struggled with them, seemed to be disturbed. struggle. Your dad was seated on the couch.
Well, that's right. Which doesn't make any sense to me.
As for the gay thing, Lyle's first interview, he said that he remembers taking out the little scooter earlier before you had gone to the show. And he doesn't remember shutting the gate when he came back. And got hit on the back.
I don't think it was close. It would, likely the gate would have been closed. We left to the back just because my car was in the back. But likely, usually, and we just got in an argument the week before, like on Wednesday or Thursday, about, my parents know that we're going to come back late. They close the gate, lock the door. They not turn on the alarm until we go to sleep. But they lock the door, they close the gate, and they turn the alarm.
They usually did not turn the alarm on until they went to sleep.
I don't know. I don't know really because I didn't come home.
But when you were home.
No, because then they wouldn't turn the alarm on when I was home, so I would just stay pushing them because.
So basically before they retired.
Basically before they retired. Well, I was really nervous lately. And they actually bought a gun. And
You also had this, you already had the other two guns.
yeah, exactly. And which that didn't make any sense. I mean, I questioned her about it. She would say anything, and she avoided the subject. And she did write a note which we found before.
What was the note about?
That it indicated that she might be expected to die. That's what it indicated.
Where is that note?
I love you so much. I'm like, my brother, he showed me around the barn. And my brother, they say, handling most of the stuff. He would eat him around the barn. And basically saying, we love you a lot, and there's a letter somewhere. Basically saying, there's a letter somewhere if I die. It all didn't make any sense because when we first moved into the house, we never used to close the door, we never locked the front door. I didn't even know what the alarm code was. And, it's never any problem. And then all of a sudden, I remember in a week, very adamant about closing the door. It didn't click in my mind first. And so we got in a lot of arguments with people. I'm like, there's no reason to close it. There's no reason to let the paper. So,
That night when you left, what time did you leave the house?
didn't know there was vacations. Rudy, the little dog, was upstairs in my mom's bedroom. And the black dog you said was outside. Right? So the dogs were always kept together.
Okay, let me tell you about the dogs. When the police officers arrived, the little dog was upstairs. The black dog they didn't see at all. Now, of course, when the police officers opened the doors, they opened the door from the living room to that your yard, rear yard court, and they opened that door. So whether the black dog was up there hiding from the police officers because the black dog didn't know them from him, and the police officers didn't see him, could have been, and the door open and could have run outside. Because I had later seen the dog in the guest house.
I've been in a guest house earlier, and I didn't see it.
And then when you guys came, and I took Lyle in there, it wasn't in there. And then later I saw it was in the maid's quarters there. So, I don't know.
What were you thinking?
The question, what time did you leave the house for the show?
We always have place somewhere. Around 8, 7:50. 6:30, I'm showing you want to see.
What did you want to see?
We wanted to see license.
You induct Steve.
Batman, yeah. Well, that's a good movie.
How long was the movie? What time did that movie?
Somewhere, I guess, the late night. Sure. I don't know. We were supposed to go to a wine tasting in Santa Monica, but I didn't know it was in Santa Monica first, and so we went the wrong way. I thought 34th was downtown. And 34th. And then, so we got to the wine tent late. And Perry was in. So,
Do you remember what your brother wanted to talk to Perry about? Perry doesn't remember.
when did he
Or
want?
Perry didn't know when your brother doesn't remember.
When did he want to touch his brother?
Your brother wanted to see Perry. And then your brother said there was something he wanted to tell him, and he thought he had told him, but he didn't. And he doesn't remember what.
Well, I wasn't there when Mom made the phone call before. I wasn't actually. So he just told me that he was meeting Perry at the chief practitioner.
So you came home
We came home.
after not seeing Perry at the Taste of LA Wine.
Yeah.
And you went to get some ID.
Yeah.
What name was the ID in? Your fake ID.
Well, what name?
Yeah.
What name was it?
So you did your name, or just the birth date was altered so you could swipe?
No. It was one of my friends' ideas. It's an ID that just looks like it.
What's the friend's name?
What was the name of the ID? I haven't seen the ID. I would have brought it here. My cousin. Timmy.
What is it, Chicago ID?
Got a picture on it? Yeah. I usually do that for it. I'll probably do that.
Wait, you're gonna drive?
Well, I don't want to drive.
Yeah, it sounds like it's doing.
Is it really?
That's what he said just a while ago.
Yeah.
Be prepared.
Well, if he wants to drive, maybe I'll just fly and meet him, because, we gotta get some, I don't really want to stay at the house. I don't know how long. I'm not gonna want to stay at the house. I don't think so. That's a good idea. Once the security leaves, for sure.
Is that who's there now, so security as far as, the we see going by?
Zoeller.
They're plain clothes now or something, we didn't see them outside. There's a gray, silver gray, Chrysler New Yorker. It's been there, was in the driveway and the right behind that car too. Well, the people we've seen, that they are wearing uniforms.
Where did you see that?
We saw them on Thursday, that'd be Wednesday last Wednesday.
I've never seen anybody before.
There's cars in the driveway that we didn't recognize. There's one Chrysler's been there a few times.
They park in the driveway a lot of times. But when I'm there, they always wear uniforms. They always wear, they're supposed to wear uniforms. To show that they're security guards.
Yeah. And the people here.
All of that. But I'm not gonna want to stay at the house, I'm not gonna want to walk the house and go search my bedroom.
Where are you gonna stay?
Mark wants me to stay with him for a couple of days, and I'm gonna either, I've got to check with the real estate agent about leasing or renting or buying a place for the tennis court. Buying in Santa Monica, and then go away. And so I was planning on doing that, but I don't want to spend a week and a half driving back to the class. I want to see all kinds of people. stop and there for stop in Chicago, stop it's nice. You know, it's fun driving back and you get tickets, but you know, and so you know, I don't like that.
Your Ford.
My Ford's at home. The Ford Escape's at home, and the Alfa Romeo's in the Alfa dealership.
How about your dad's Mercedes?
That's at the company.
That's a lease car.
That's at the company. We're doing that at the company. So, get a lot of ambitions. So I don't know what this is. I guess, I mean, I'm not going to be able to disclose it. I don't want to disclose it. And we'll be able to disclose it. So I guess we're going to go on tour. We're not the same people, so we go a little bit differently. I want to train for 6 months, and he wants to train for a month. And he wants to go on tour and start playing matches immediately. And I want to do it in 6 months because I'm ready. But yeah, when we go on tour, basically, we start really going on tour. We're going to go on tour in 2006, and I'm pretty confident. We're both pretty good with a while that we can train. I definitely have more of an ambition to make it. I see my, as you know, I'm sure our family is a long line of incredibly successful athletes and incredibly successful people, self-made millionaires and athletes. My great-grandfather was the Hall of Fame in baseball, my grandfather in soccer, my grandmother in swimming, my dad in swimming, and this, millions. So, I mean, we can't become a self-made millionaire, but we can become the one world famous. And that was 51. And I mean, my dad was very strong about that. Success going down. And that's probably what he raised us. And so, I guess it's probably the reason why Lyle wanted to go to Princeton. It's because my dad really wanted him to go to Princeton after I went for 3 years. And so it felt really bad that when my dad was gone, that he was just going to go, yeah, I'm going to do what I want now. He said, you know, I'm going to do what my dad wants me to do. And that's a lot of what we've been working after. Like he wanted to get Castro acute. And so that's one of the things that I'm working toward to do. It's probably going to cause some problems. And I don't know if I'll be able to do it because it's going to happen in Colorado system. Anything political could be destroyed. But it's certainly a goal. It's something that's expanded. I mean, I have my goals pretty well mapped out. You know, I wanted to go to politics, but that one was too. But, you know, I want to live up to things that my dad wants to live up to. And I guess, you know, they say, you know, live your own life. But my own life was part of his dream. And, you know, I don't know. I think I'll just, I mean, it's only been a month amazing myself. And I feel like it could have been a week ago.
Looks like it's become big increase for that.
And I was still thinking about the 5 hours a day.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, no, really.
I used to go to bed like a 4 o'clock in the morning, like I did this morning, around 3 or 12, whatever time I'm tired, so that I don't have to sit in bed and think about it. It's not waiting until I'm dead tired. And so varies from 12 to 4, so I wake up late. But it's going to be stuff. Go to the house.
Well, maybe by doing that, by going on 10 south, you can do something else to think about. Right now, you're not really doing,
Exactly.
you're not doing anything.
Exactly.
So you probably need that, so.
Yes.
Think about this.
And I want to be, I like LA. Jersey is a dreary place. Beautiful.
Beautiful.
So. What?
We trade in a second with you.
zone. We used to live in a mountain avenue and 2 lakes, 78 acres, and just trees a mile drive into our house, so growing grass, and it was a beautiful place. In Preston. And that's why part of the reason we wanted to do is split grounds and get back to the East Coast. But, I don't want that right now. LA needs something pumping up a little bit.
No slower moving up here too.
Oh, yeah.
When you went to the movies, do the ticket stuff. You don't do the stuff.
I think we had the ticket stubs. I think we had the ticket stubs after the movies. I don't have the ticket stubs.
Well, I'm to see him, just let me know.
I don't have the ticket stubs.
It's the same thing to maybe in the car. Your car.
It could be. I usually just either Lyle puts in his pants, I put in my pants, and unless they get washed out in the laundry,
Yeah, they're there forever.
they're from my, when I came in my car, I haven't cleaned my car. I just stumbled over and stuff. So it could be.
Did you have any recent problems with your parents at all?
Well, actually, we spent the whole summer together.
That's unusual. You don't do spend the summer together like that, or
No, I do.
not been.
I do. We do it every summer.
Yeah.
Except for last summer, which I fractured my ankle, so it's pretty right. But we basically spent every second of the day with him. And so it was pretty close. Right up until after the day back. But no real good. My dad, in the last minute, April, thought that I wasn't open enough to open enough intense. And so,
Sounds like it's been a difficult project.
yeah, exactly. And we wanted to go to college real bad and get away from them. Just trying to stay away and doing other things.
Were you going to stay on campus in UCLA?
Yeah, I was hoping to go. You've talked to Jerry O'Zeel. Who? Jerry O'Zeel. He's a psychiatrist.
Give me the name again.
Jerry O'Zeel.
No, I haven't heard that.
I haven't heard the name. No. Probably kept that on purpose just because it might slip through the papers.
Nothing close to fingers.
Okay.
Who? Ozeel?
Oziel. Definitely my psychiatrist. My parents basically made us get one after a job access. And so we made it to me. And he's very good friend of mine. And they spent a lot of time with us after this. And so he had many meetings with my parents together. And they thought, and it's good for me. So I don't know what he's going to tell you. I'm sure he can maybe able to help you out wrong.
Because now he was one that you talked to.
Yeah, my parents, he had meetings with my mom and dad together. And then he was just meetings with everyone. So.
Have you seen him after the death?
Yeah, he came over and talked to me. Probably. You'll see him.
Yeah, it could be a good idea. Yeah. It's something that would be tough for anybody, but you probably need to sit down and talk to a professional. Don't give it up.
No.
Although we will contact him, he probably will not give us any information because we have what they call a patient-doctor confidentiality.
Yeah.
So what I may do is have you call him and tell him it's okay to talk to us, which is all this takes, because you're the one that holds the confidentiality.
He may not be able to tell you about parents.
No, we should still be able to do it.
Even though I think.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah, because there's a confidentiality that the patient holds, that he can't give up that confidentiality.
So my parents would know patients sometimes.
Right,
Yeah, but
your patients aren't, your parents aren't here to
aren't here to hold,
aren't here to hold the confidentiality.
so you'll be able to give up that confidentiality. So if you'd like to talk. Do you know of anyone that had keys to the house that you and you and Lyle and Lyle wouldn't remember them?
I didn't put a key in the house. We were always together. We just like the keys lying on.
So what I'm getting at is whether anybody else got it, had it, maybe some more people that had it into the house that could have.
I would think so. I don't know. I don't know if they would. I don't know.
There's nothing going on at the house work-wise that would necessitate giving a key out.
No, I don't think so. But possibly from there.
Did you get a normal allowance or we just?
Yeah, but that pretty much handed over the second. We have $180 a month.
Do you have a credit card or?
I just got mine. That
You mean
was
by it ended over the summer?
well, when I went to play tennis and so on, I really didn't do that much. They were with me, so I didn't get it home. Yeah, but when I was going to have UCLA.
For the memorial service, you and Lyle were able to get watching.
Yeah, wow, I couldn't have to his lifelong ambition was to get abroad. And in fact, I think that one, and then trying to Were you with them? Yeah, I was actually getting close for the memorial service. And actually, he asked me if I wanted to go on. Another go on. My dad didn't like that, show it, and I didn't. So I suffered a lot. But
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have a matter that currently has just arisen that requires a little more discussion. As you might have noted in the past, those things do happen. So we'll take a recess and give you a chance to stretch your legs or get coffee, whatever you like. And if you would return at a quarter to the hour, 11:15. Don't discuss this case with anyone. Don't form any opinions about it. And we'll have you back here at 1:45. And council will remain and we'll continue our discussion. All right, let's continue this discussion. There apparently was a transcript delivered to the defense, which had been edited based upon discussions between the parties. And the defense on August the 1st received the transcript and assumed that the transcript that had been delivered reflected the final agreement between the parties. And the defense did not review the transcript. And at this point, having listened to the tape in court for the first time, realizes that the transcript and the tape recording, which is the basis of the transcript, is different than what the defense understood to be the agreement between the parties. And at this point, number one, the court wants to determine whether or not it's the people's understanding as well that the portions that the defense is now complaining about were to be in the final version based upon your negotiations.
There were many negotiations and many objections made by the defense. We had discussions about this. When I came to the finalized transcript, I brought it to counsel's office on the 1st of August. I indicated to Ms. Morrissey, and in fact, Ms. Abramson came minutes after I arrived.
I'm
that
gonna object to that statement, it has nothing to do with that conflict. I don't know when Mr. Creon lives.
you were in the.
All right, it doesn't really matter much. Go ahead.
And I told Ms. Morrissey that this was the transcript that I intended to present to the jury. I gave her the transcript and she commenced to read it. And I hadn't heard any objections at all until right now. And this is August 12th.
Okay, there's the defense isn't disputing that. My question to you is whether or not you have any recollection or understanding that the portions that the defense is complaining about now that have been deleted from the transcript and the tape recording were really portions that should have been left in the transcript and tape recording.
In my opinion, when I gave her the transcript, I believe that they should not have come in. And I indicated that this was a transcript that I was agreeing to. And when I gave it to counsel on the 1st, I told her that this is a transcript that I had, they had asked that the last nearly 10 pages be redacted. And they wanted certain areas in that I did not agree to. And I told Ms. Morrissey that this is what I'm agreeing to. I excised most of what they wanted and I gave her the copy of it. And
You excised most of what they wanted to have excised? Or
correct.
Right, and did you also excise portions that the defense wanted to have in?
I did.
And did you notify the defense of that?
I did.
Did you do that orally or in
I
writing?
did that when
or-
I handed the transcript. I said, this is what I'm agreeing to. Gave it to Ms. Morrissey and she commenced to read it while I was there. And then I left and I never heard anything else.
And just one additional thing, when you handed the transcript to her, it was just the final version. It wasn't a version that was unredacted or unedited
No,
with
this
notations as to what it was that you were removing so that somebody could look at the document and ascertain what was being removed.
This is the final version.
Okay, all right, Ms. Marcy.
Your Honor, Mr. Kuriyama, after extensive discussions and an agreement between us as to what was going to go in and what was going to go out, because there was give and take on both sides, came to my office and presented me with a transcript, which I believed reflected the discussions that he had had. He did not tell me I have made changes. He did not indicate to me that this was anything other than the version that we had agreed upon. And I accepted that. And I believed it was the version that we had agreed upon. I had no reason, and nothing that he said would have led me to believe that he had made changes in addition to the changes that we had discussed and that we both knew about.
Well, the dispute apparently is whether or not the portions that Mr. Kuriyama removed were portions that both sides agreed should be removed. That's the bottom line.
No, and I can give the court what was removed. Essentially, after there is a discussion, which is at now page 33.
I don't have the transcript here.
Why don't you mark a copy of the original transcript for the judge and compare it to this version so he can see.
Here it is. I have a copy of the objections that I submitted to the district attorney's office. The sections that are cut out are indicated in purple. And I'll just mark the purple on the side.
And those are the parts that you thought were to be in?
Yes, that were not in.
That's all right. Well, let me ask Mr. Kuriyama, did you have a document that you used to edit and make the final version?
I did.
And does it have on your document some memorandum or effort to remove those or document that you would remove those portions in some way?
It has my highlighting of those portions I did not intend to present.
Okay, and portion that the defense is complaining about are pages 33 through 35 of the unedited version.
That's correct.
All right, and all right, I will review it, and you can. Let me go back and say that none of these modifications, wherever they appear on the transcript or in the tape, have been done in consultation with the court. These were things done by counsel. And this is first, the court has been made aware that there is any problem, has been any problem. The court certainly encouraged counsel to meet and confer to resolve any disputes regarding the tape so that it could be played without such issues that we're now presented with ever arising. All right, I read the portion which begins in the unedited version of the transcript at line 22 of page 33 and goes down to line 10 of page 35. And your understanding was that this was agreed upon by both sides to be removed?
If I may approach, Your Honor.
Yes.
I do have my working copy of the transcript. Some of the writing is Miss Morrissey's writing.
Your Honor, the document that Mr. Kuriyama was working off of is a document with our objections that predated the court's ruling on the admissibility of the Calabasas incidents. Once the court ruled those admissible, then of course our position, our objections with respect to the mention of Calabasas on this tape were no longer valid. So
Okay.
there was,
That's on page 34, lines 15 through 19.
yes.
All right, let me inquire just briefly, because I don't think this is a matter of that should require much more time here. What is the people's objection, Mr. Kuriyama, to this portion being in the tape that is played for the jury?
Number one, the defense has made objections to what advice they've gotten from counsel as to what actions they would take. This is an indication that there these are actions that the attorney told them to take, and they want that before the jury, I suppose, to show that they were doing some kind of charity work. And I objected to that. I was not going to present that.
Okay, but other than that generalized view, do you have any legal objection to this being a part of the tape that's played to the jury?
I think it's irrelevant.
Okay. Well, it does relate to the activity of the defendant at and near the time of the crime and his state of mind, which is really why the tape recording has been played, and to document his activities. So to the extent that it was part of the conversation, if that's your only objection, what I'll do is permit the defense, if you could find that portion of the tape on some other unredacted tape recording, you can play that for the jury during your cross-examination of the witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I just have a moment to be able to queue up? Michael, do you have?
Well, I don't know if we have other direct examination of the witness before the cross. All right, then I'll certainly we'll take a break here and let you find that, and you can play it. And if it requires you to, at a later time, prepare a transcript of that, you can do that as well.
I think
Would it be permissible, you know, because the jury doesn't have a transcript, it's very hard to use Morrissey from cross-examination to take the officer through every word.
No.
What it says.
No, if,
And we need to get a transcript.
it can be played for the jury, and if you don't have a transcript, then you can obtain one at a later time or play it at a later time.
Your Honor,
I think Mrs. Bazanich is volunteering to have one prepared during this research. She has it.
Your
I
Honor,
don't know if that's what she's volunteering or not. Yes.
okay. The transcripts are on a disc, and unless this copy, this redacted copy replaced it on the old disc, we should be able to pull up that one page.
Sure.
Assuming that by redacting it, it didn't disappear.
All right, well, that's,
So I
you can do that fine. Otherwise, you can just play the tape, and later on, the defense can prepare or present a transcript. This similar situation arose at the beginning of the prosecution's case when they played the audio tape of the 911 call, and there was some controversy over the transcript, and therefore there was no transcript given to the jury. And it's just as a point of reminder, I'm still not aware that there has been a transcript marked as an exhibit regarding that tape. So if there is no transcript, the tape can be played, and later on, a transcript can be marked and received as an exhibit in relationship to this tape. All right, we'll be in recess until counsel are in the trial. The defendant, Eric Menendez, is in court with his attorneys. People are represented. The jury is not present. Have counsel been able to deal with the subject that was being discussed?
Yes, the transcript has been prepared and the tape is queued. We're ready to proceed.
All right, and is this something that people want to do on their direct or?
Yes.
Okay. Is there going to be any cross-examination of the witness after people complete their direct examination?
Yes, Your Honor, not extended cross-examination,
Just time estimate, how long do you think it would be?
10 minutes.
All right, and then after that, what is the proposal regarding the next evidence?
Mr. Brunon, and I believe there's going to be some defense objection to his testimony. In addition, he has the tape with him, and I think the defense has a request about that tape.
The defense has done what?
Has a request, they want to do something with it, I think. Is that right? The tape that Mr. Brunon has with him?
Yes.
All right, well, let's deal with this jury, and let me, before we have the jury come out, let me inquire, is it anticipated that there will be some more evidence for the Eric Menendez jury today?
No, Your Honor.
Well, Your Honor,
Other than Mr. Brunon?
Right.
let me just say, we have a number of defense witnesses here, and we'd be prepared to put them on this afternoon if there's no prosecution witnesses here. We thought they were gonna have all their witnesses here today and finish. And we have defense witnesses that have to leave by tomorrow night.
Well, we're not going to force the people to present their evidence in such a way that the people will not rest before the defense commences. The reason, if there are witnesses here who have to leave, that is a byproduct of the extensive examination of the previous witness, and the examination was primarily done by the defense, so the defense is going to have to bear the burden of any inconvenience these witnesses might suffer.
Well, we definitely want to deal, though, as soon as possible today with our out-of-country witness and her lawyer, whose time we are paying for.
Well, we'll deal with it again. We'll deal with it as we have time to do so. That witness is here and the lawyer is here, but those things were done without consultation with the court prior to their arrival. The court didn't know they existed.
We did notify the court the day before they got here, and told the court they would be here the next day.
Well, you didn't tell me they're coming from out of anywhere, and I don't know who they are or what they were here for. So they're here, and it's unfortunate, but the people are still putting on their evidence. How long is it anticipated the hearing involving Mr. Brunon would take? Anybody have an idea?
I don't know. I don't know what they're objecting to precisely.
Is there any prospect just from the sense of what it is the defense is objecting to, that Mr. Bruno would not be testifying at all before one or both juries.
Yes.
And I don't agree, so I think we have to
Okay.
litigate it.
All right, so I just trying to decide whether after we do this, we should excuse this jury until this afternoon or tomorrow morning. So we'll have to make a decision after we hear a little bit more about the situation involving Mr. Bruno. There's still evidence involving the other jury.
Yes, and Mr. Brunon is not available tomorrow, so.
All right, let's have the jury out. We'll complete this portion of it, and then we'll let them go to lunch, and we'll deal with other matters if we don't have time to start with the other jury. All right, the jurors have all returned, and the witnesses again on the witness stand. You may continue your examination, Mr. Trial.
Thank you, Your Honor. There's another audio tape. It's another portion of the September 17th, 1989 interview with Eric Menendez. May I have that marked as Exhibit 130
Yes, it's at 1:30.
with the 2-page transcript of that portion? Exhibit 131, please.
Yeah.
Your Honor, may I pass the transcripts out to the jury?
Yes.
Detective Zoeller, what we're about to play, is that another portion of the September 17th, 1989 interview that you had with Eric Menendez?
It is.
Lyle, involved in charity or something? Yeah, that was correct. Down in Venice Beach, I worked with them. Yeah, great. I wish I would have worked with them a lot closer to the situation. But, what age is it? St. Joseph's. Priests or fathers or reverends or whatever they call it. Kind of what I can do about helping people. I had a plan of what I wanted to do. But when I hear the things you said, it deals with hope. And it's something that I want to set up. But yeah. How did that develop the insurance? Is it because of the Calabasas thing? It was because of the Calabasas thing, and but the lawyers, but that was the reason. But it was just. You ever help people like that?
Isn't what we do, and,
Yeah, I know.
Although it seems like we may be on the other side, we do help them.
No, I know.
Quite a few times.
Yeah, but for people that are really needy, I never felt like it's amazing. It's amazing. I don't know how it goes to your heart. Yeah, I see people like that, man. So, any people that I see, I was friends with that committee. I don't know, when I was young, I used to love everything. I couldn't branch off the tree. I lived on the tree. So I used to love everything. I always worked for it. And as soon as when you get older, they have to experience things. Helping people like that.
Detective Zoeller, did you recognize Eric Menendez's voice on both of those tapes?
Yes.
Now, on the first tape, Exhibit 128, there was some discussion about Dr. Oziel, correct?
That's correct.
Did you ever get authorization to speak to Dr. Oziel?
No.
And the first time that you had met Dr. Oziel, would it be fair to say was when you did the search warrant on his home on March 8, 1990?
Yes, it is.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Thank you.
Detective Zoeller, this interview on September 17th was at the home of Carlos and Teresita Baralt, correct?
That's correct.
And Teresita is the sister of Jose Menendez,
Yes, that's correct.
and Carlos is Eric's uncle.
Teresita's husband, that's correct.
Okay. And you went to the home on the 17th, actually to interview the Baralts, right?
That's correct.
Had you made arrangements to interview the Baralts prior to your arriving at their house on the 17th?
Yes, I had.
So this was something that had been arranged the day before?
I'm not sure whether it was the day before or not, but it was prior to that day.
And had you made the arrangements with Mr. and Mrs. Baralt?
Yes,
So they knew you were coming to their home on the 17th of September?
that's correct.
And did you also know at the time you went to the home on the 17th that Eric had been spending a lot of time with the Baralts?
I wouldn't characterize it as a lot of time. I know he had spent time there
Okay. He had been staying with them
periodically.
occasionally.
That's correct.
And in fact, when you arrived at the house, you found out that Eric was staying there at that time.
Correct.
Okay, and in fact, he was asleep upstairs when you arrived.
That's correct.
And you had his aunt go up and wake him up so that he could come down and talk to you. Is that correct?
Not exactly.
Okay, well, his aunt woke him up for you.
That's correct.
Okay. And then you had a conversation with him during the time you were at the house.
Yes.
Now, when you started talking to Eric, you began by telling him that you had spoken to a number of his friends.
That's correct.
And you named certain names of individuals that you had spoken to.
That's correct.
Okay, and he also suggested names for you to speak to.
Yes.
And you said that you had talked to various coaches, right?
Yes.
And he asked you who, correct?
That's correct.
And he also gave you names of coaches that you might talk to.
Yes.
Eric also told you in the beginning of the interview, he said something to the effect of Craig and his dad did not have a good rapport. Do you recall that portion of the tape?
Yes, I do.
And was it your understanding at that time that Eric had a friend by the name of Craig Signorelli?
Yes,
Okay, you knew of his existence.
I did.
And had you already, in fact, spoken to Craig at that time?
Yes, I had.
Okay. Were you aware at the time of this interview that Mr. Menendez had threatened
Objection,
to kill?
Your Honor. May we approach?
Yes, you may.
Did you ask any follow-up questions, Detective Zoeller, about why Eric told you that Craig and his dad didn't have a good rapport?
No.
Now, Eric also talked to you during the interview about smoke in the room. Do you recall that portion of the tape?
Yes, I do.
And you were aware prior to arriving in New Jersey that Eric had reported that there was smoke, a heavy haze of smoke in the room, correct?
Yes, yes, I was aware of that.
That was something that you had, some information that you had gotten from Detective Edmonds?
Yes,
And Detective Zoeller, isn't it correct that it was this mention of smoke by Eric that was one of the things that made you very suspicious of him?
one of the things, yes.
Okay. And you indicated in the beginning of the interview to Eric that you were not there to nail him. Do you recall that?
Yes,
Okay. But in fact, you were suspicious of him at the time you had this interview in New Jersey. Right?
somewhat, yes.
And one of the things that made you suspicious was the reports of smoke that were repeated during the interview in New Jersey.
Yes.
At one point during your conversation with Eric, he mentioned a letter or a note or something that his mother had written. Do you recall that part of the tape?
Yes, I do.
And this was a note that Eric described as something about her dying.
Yes.
Okay. And is this, he also said, he also told you that this note, he believed was in the possession of either his brother or his uncle Brian.
That's correct. That's what he stated.
Now, do you know a person named Brian Anderson?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and do you understand that Brian Anderson is a relative of Mrs. Menendez?
Yes, her brother.
Okay, and this note that Eric spoke about, did you understand that to be a suicide note that Mrs. Menendez had left in the house and that her sons had found?
At the point that he made that statement, is that what you're asking?
Yes.
No, I did not take it that way.
Okay. Did you make any attempt to obtain the note that was referred to, that Eric referred to on September 17th, to find out what was in it?
I asked Eric about the note, and he stated that he would obtain the note to show us, which he never did.
Okay, but that isn't on the tape, is it?
No, it is not.
So was it sometime after the tape that you asked Eric for this suicide note?
Yes.
Or the note about your mother's death? Did you ever contact Brian Anderson and ask him if he had the note?
I don't believe I did, no.
Detective Zoeller, at one point during the interview, towards the end, Eric talks about going to college. Do you recall that portion
Yes.
of the tape? Okay. And he says, but we wanted to go to college really bad. We were getting away from him, you know. And then there's an unintelligible, was trying to stay away and do other things. Do you recall Eric telling you that?
Yes.
Did you ask him any follow-up questions about who he was getting away from?
No.
Did you understand him to mean when he said we were getting away from him, did you understand that to be a reference to his father?
I don't recall.
Okay, you weren't curious about who he had to get away from?
I didn't key on it at that time, so I don't recall what my impression was of it.
And he also said that he was trying to stay away and do other things. Did you ask any follow-up questions about who he was staying away from?
No.
Now, Mr. Kuriyama also asked you about the therapist, Dr. Oziel. Now, the first time you ever heard Dr. Oziel's name was during this interview with Eric on September 17th.
That's correct.
Okay. And it was Eric who told you about him, correct?
Correct.
And Eric, in fact, spelled out his name for you.
He did.
And he told you he was in Beverly Hills.
Yes, he did.
Okay. And in fact, you suggested at that time that you thought it would be a good idea for Eric to continue to see Dr. Oziel.
Yes, I did.
Okay. And Eric agreed with that, correct?
Correct.
And you also discussed waiving confidentiality so that you could talk to Dr. Oziel.
That's correct.
Okay. And Eric, in fact, agreed to waive confidentiality so that you could talk to Dr. Oziel. Is that correct?
Yes, he did.
Thank you, I have nothing further.
Any redirect?
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective Zoeller. Did you understand Eric Menendez to be giving you authority to go to talk to this Dr. Oziel that he was seeing on September 17th? And you spoke to him?
No,
He told you that he was seeing a Dr. Oziel, a Beverly Hills psychiatrist, and he was seeing the psychiatrist because he said his parents made him, or made us, he and his brother, get a psychiatrist after the Calabasas thing. Is that right?
that's correct.
What did the Calabasas thing mean to you?
It meant the Calabasas burglaries that he and Lyle were involved in.
Now, after the discussion about Dr. Oziel, you discussed with him confidentiality, correct?
Yes, I did.
Did he ever tell you, I give you my authorization, go talk to him and he can tell you all about me?
He wanted us to go talk to him, and then it went into the confidentiality issue, to which it was left that he would contact the doctor, giving up his confidentiality.
Okay, so he never gave up the confidentiality to you?
That's correct.
And this information that you gave to Eric Menendez occurred on September 17th, 1989, correct?
Yes, it was.
Is it your understanding that the confession was made by Eric Menendez on October 31st, 1989?
Objection, Your Honor. Beyond this
Objection sustained.
Counsel asked you about the suicide note, or this note left by Mrs. Menendez, and directing your attention to page 20 of the transcript of Exhibit 128.
Yes, I have it.
Eric Menendez indicated to you that his mother had written a note, correct?
That's correct.
That she expected to die,
That's what it stated, what he stated.
and she had written a letter to, I guess, he and his brother. Is that?
That's
accurate?
correct.
And she said that she loved them a lot.
Yes, that's what he stated.
And that Lyle or his uncle had the letter.
Yes.
I have nothing further. Your Honor.
Any recross?
Very brief. Detective Zoeller, regarding the confidentiality, the transcript indicates that you had a discussion, this is at page 32 at the bottom, that you had a discussion, a preliminary discussion, and you told Eric that Dr. Oziel couldn't talk to you unless he gave up confidentiality, right?
That's correct.
And you asked him, so you'd be able to give up that confidentiality? And he responds, oh. And then you say, because would like to talk to him. And Eric responds, okay, yeah. And that's what's on the transcript, correct?
That's correct.
There's nothing in there about anything further that Eric was supposed to do. Isn't that true?
I believe you're correct.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Anything else?
Detective Zoeller, is it your experience that if you had gone to Dr. Oziel at that point with no authorization, no written authorization, no call from Eric Menendez telling Dr. Oziel, go ahead and tell the detectives everything that he knew up to that point, at least September 17th, 1989, did you think you can go to that doctor and get information about Eric Menendez at that point?
Objection, calls respect.
Are you asking what his state of mind
Yes, Your
was
Honor.
on that date?
Correct.
Okay, the objection is overruled.
I would have expected Dr. Oziel to tell me that there was confidentiality. He could not talk about any of his patients.
Thank you.
Anything else?
At that point in time, had you spoken to a therapist or psychiatrist who had been treating Mrs. Menendez by the name of Dr. Cox?
I spoke to Dr. Cox. I don't know whether I had spoken to him before that time or after that time.
And in fact, what you did was you told Dr. Cox that there was no confidentiality because Mrs. Menendez was dead. Is that correct?
In reference to Mrs. Menendez, yes.
And you were able to obtain information from Dr. Cox.
Yes.
Okay, so well, I will leave it at that.
No further questions.
All right, anything further on that limited subject?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Detective Zoeller, Eric Menendez was not dead, was he? There was still confidentiality.
All right, the objection is that it's argumentative, is that it?
Yes, Your Honor, you read my mind.
All right, the objection is sustained. You can rephrase the question if you like.
Was Eric Menendez dead?
Again, the same ruling.
Did the same reasoning apply to you, or in your mind, that was applied to Mrs. Menendez with respect to Dr. Cox?
The circumstances were completely different.
Thank you.
All right, you may,
No further questions.
thank you. You may step down.
Thank you.
And let me see counsel at the side here. We'll discuss our little schedule situation. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the next evidence. Okay, let's get the reporter over here, please. The next evidence will be this afternoon, so we'll excuse you at this point and ask that you return at 1:30. It's possible we won't get started promptly at 1:30, but if you're here, at least we'll be able to if things work our way. So you're excused at this point. Don't discuss this case with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it. We'll see you here at 1:30. And let me see the bailiff for a second. All right, well, don't get carried away, Mr. Brown.
Can you sit in the jury box, please?
Well, you could sit wherever is comfortable at this point. You don't have to get on the witness stand. The jurors have all gone, and counsel have requested an opportunity to deal with certain matters that concern Mr. Brunon's proposed testimony. And the people have submitted to the court and defense a proposed list of questions that they intend to ask. And also, there was some mention of a tape recording of some sort that the defense had some request regarding. As far as that latter issue, did anyone want to speak to it at this point?
I'll speak to that, Your Honor. It was our understanding that Mr. Brunon was subpoenaed by the prosecution to appear to testify concerning conversations that he had with his client on or about October 31st, 1989. And we were informed this morning that Mr. Brunon brought with him a tape recorded statement that he received from Dr. Oziel. And when I asked Mr. Brunon out in the hallway what the nature of that tape statement was, he indicated that he was asserting a privilege with respect to that tape recorded statement. It's our position, Your Honor, that in order to effectively cross-examine Mr. Brunon about the content of the conversations which he's about to reveal in any event, that we should be entitled the opportunity to listen to this tape recording before we cross-examine him as a witness. And I think as to any claim of privilege, the privilege would be waived. And at the very least, I think the court should review the tape in camera to determine whether it would be relevant to a cross-examination of this witness and whether it should be disclosed pursuant to a waiver or pursuant to our right to cross-examination.
Yeah, I was going to have your views as well, Mr. Brunon. You are aware basically of the areas of inquiry that will relate to your testimony. So with that in mind, did you want to respond to Mr. Bird's request?
Excuse me, Your Honor. I think Lyle Menendez should be here for this.
Okay, sure. So now. All right, Lyle Menendez is here as well. Mr. Bruno?
Governor, I may have contributed to the confusion. I thought that the claim I had was related to the phone call of October 31st or November 1st. It turns out that I had erroneously assumed that the tape that I have deals with something entirely different. And it has nothing to do with the Menendez case.
All right. And did you ever have, or do you have a tape that relates to the October 31st phone call?
No.
All right, Mr. Burt, did you want to be heard further?
Well, Mr. Brunon did indicate to me out in the hallway that it didn't relate to the Menendez brothers, but related to something concerning the case in a broader sense. And when I questioned him about that, he indicated that perhaps that statement was too broad. So I'm concerned that
The broad statement was too broad.
the broad statement was too broad. And I'm concerned that there is information on the tape that would be relevant to the cross-examination. And I think in light of the waiver of privilege, which has already taken place, it's our request to the court that the court make a record of what's in the tape and listen to it and not leave it up to Mr. Brunon to decide whether it's relevant or not. We're not asking to invade privileged material, but I think a record should be made as to what's in the tape, and we're asking the court to conduct an in-camera hearing to see if, in fact, that the tape relates to a viable area of cross-examination.
Well, the waiver that was accomplished by the testimony of Dr. Oziel related only to the conversation that took place on October 31st. There has been no general waiver of attorney-client privilege in relationship to any and all conversations that might have occurred or communications that might have occurred between Dr. Oziel and Mr. Brunon. And if counsel represents to the court that whatever tape recording he possesses does not relate to the October 31st conversation, then that should be the end of it. I don't see any need for the court to listen to it any more than there's a need for the court to review all of the files and records in Mr. Brunon's office that relate to Dr. Oziel to verify that there's nothing there that might be relevant to this case.
Well, the court has taken a position we've given and exaggerated it and then refuted it, but the position is Mr. Brunon was...
So like developing a straw man.
Yes. Mr. Brunon was called here as a witness. He wasn't asked, as far as I know, to bring any material with him. He voluntarily shows up in court with a tape recorder.
No, it wasn't quite that way.
Well, I don't know, but that's...
Yeah, apparently what happened was that he mentioned something about a tape to Ms. Bozanich on the phone, and she mentioned it to your colleagues, and they mentioned it to me, and there was some byplay before you arrived as to whether it was going to be brought to court, and the request was by one of your colleagues, I believe, to have Mr. Brunon bring it to court. So it wasn't that Mr. Brunon brought it to court on his own by his own decision, but there was a request by your colleagues to have it here.
All right. And so we're not seeking to invade all the documents in Mr. Brunon's file. We're talking about one specific piece of evidence, which, as I understand it, was given to him by Dr. Oziel on or about October 31st, 89?
No, that's not true. And the only reason I made the statement that broadly relates is because Dr. Oziel was cross-examined about almost everything that's ever occurred in his adult life. So in that sense, since it relates to Dr. Oziel, that's the sense I made that statement. I can assure you it has nothing to do with the conversation that I had with Dr. Oziel at the end of October, beginning of November.
All right, the court accepts that representation and finds that there's no reason to listen to the tape to determine what it contains at this point.
Your Honor, could I make one additional inquiry, which is I think Dr. Oziel also waived the privilege with respect to his testimony concerning the Court Day incident. And I would like to inquire whether it relates to that incident, because if so, I think there's a waiver as to that testimony.
I mean, about all conversations he had with Mr. Brunon regarding that?
Yes.
I don't recall that there was much testimony regarding Mr. Brunon's conversations, other than some advice and representation regarding the settlement of the case. But I don't see how that would open the door to any and all papers and documents or tapes that might be in Mr. Brunon's possession. The only reason we're focusing on this tape is that someone mentioned it, but I think anyone familiar with the practice of law would surmise that there were a lot of other documents in Mr. Brunon's possession that relate to that incident as well. And there's no reason to believe that this tape is in any different category than any other documents that might be in Mr. Brunon's possession, if in fact it does relate to that. So I don't see any reason to go into it and listen to the tape.
There was a second issue which
yes,
we wanted to be heard on, which is according to the prosecution's proposed questions, she proposes to have Mr. Brunon testify to his opinion of whether Dr. Oziel appeared frightened after the seizure of the tapes at his home on March 8, 1990. In response to that, it would be our position that the defense would then be entitled to prove the content or to show the jury the videotape, which is the best evidence of whether Oziel appeared to be frightened. And given the court's restrictions on our ability to contradict the prosecution's case, as illustrated by the ruling yesterday, I'd ask the court to exercise its discretion not to interject this issue into the case. I think it's excludable under Evidence Code Section 352 because his speculation that Oziel was or was not frightened then leads us to have to contradict that through a very lengthy videotape. And I don't think that we need any further testimony on that collateral issue.
All right. Your remark is akin to an argumentative question where something is included in the question that requires the witness to respond. So my response is I don't accept the first portion of the question, the observation you made as far as what was given, what occurred yesterday. So with that response, let me hear from the prosecution in regards to why it is relevant to have this witness testify to his subjective opinion that the witness, Oziel, was frightened after the seizure of the tapes.
Yeah, I believe that there was cross-examination on that point by the defense, and I can't remember precisely what day, but I remember that there was testimony from Dr. Oziel about the fact of his state of mind at the time that the tapes were seized or that the search warrant. I think the better question to ask him is not after the seizure, but at the prospect of the seizure, because I think that was where, if you recall the videotape, Mr. Brunon was there for that part of the time. And I believe Dr. Oziel indicated on either direct or cross-examination that he was frightened. I believe that was his testimony by the prospect or the seizure.
Asking a witness whether someone else was frightened is asking for a conclusion that normally would not be permissible. And I don't know if Mr. Brunon has any special expertise in the field of determining whether someone is suffering from fright, but I doubt it. And I don't think it's a proper area for opinion evidence.
And then, Your Honor, the third area relates to what although it's not reflected in the questions, I'm wondering whether the prosecution intends to elicit similar, in fact, identical opinion testimony concerning the conversation that Mr. Brunon had with Dr. Oziel on October 31st, 89. That is, do you intend to ask him whether he, in his opinion, he was frightened?
Well, I was going to ask him a more open-ended question. I think it was on my list of how was he or how did he behave? And I believe the response is something akin to he was tense or he was nervous or something like that. And I believe that Dr. Lulo has already been permitted to testify to that. So this would be corroborative not only of the witness, Dr. Oziel, but of Dr. Lulo.
Well, certainly the witness can describe the tone of voice and manner of speech and be descriptive in that. That's certainly an appropriate area of inquiry. I don't know exactly how far it goes and what the evidence would be, but certainly the prosecution can inquire along those lines.
Our objection is to characterizations. In other words, Dr. Lulo described his voice was clipped. There were some other descriptive phrases. That's different than, in my opinion, he appeared upset or frightened. And our objection is to any characterizations he would be offering along those lines.
Well, I would say that there's a difference between being upset and being frightened, and one can characterize the former much more easily than perhaps the latter. Being frightened is, again, a state of mind that really can, unless one observes the individual and sees what the individual is doing, and it's just cowering in a corner or something, it's kind of difficult to just form an opinion based upon words and how a person speaks. The person is indeed frightened. So I would say that the objection would be well taken as to that. If someone describes an individual sounding upset based upon the way someone is speaking, that would seem to me to be an appropriate descriptive analysis and would be admissible.
I believe that the term Mr. Brunon would use is anxious.
That would sound to be appropriate. Something that can be, depending on what is described, could be a proper opinion evidence. So we'll have to wait and see how it's played out in this testimony.
And then lastly, Your Honor, the last two areas of inquiry here, namely whether he asserted a privilege in hearings in Santa Monica, and as to whether Mr. Brunon required a court order before he allowed Dr. Oziel to testify, I think are irrelevant or should be excluded under 352, because it does get us into areas of the appellate process and the nature of the litigation, which is not germane.
In addition, Your Honor, along the same lines, I think they wanted to elicit that Dr. Oziel paid Mr. Brunon to file a brief, and we would certainly object to that.
What is the people's response?
As to whether or not he asserted the privilege on behalf of his clients, I think it's very relevant because I believe at the end of Cross yesterday, there was something about Dr. Oziel telling his patients secrets. And I think that the fact that he did in fact assert the privilege and out of his own pocket took steps to continue to assert his client's privilege belies the impression that was left by the defense in their cross-examination of Dr. Oziel. And as to whether or not he testified in front of the grand jury under court order, I think it's relevant to show that, and it's to corroborate the fact that he was not here testifying in front of this jury or in front of the grand jury out of caprice or whimsy, but rather did it because he was ordered to do so by a court.
But Your Honor, if we get into this, then we have to get into the whole area, because potential civil liability, if he had failed to assert the privilege and ultimately the Supreme Court ruled differently, and then we can get into his knowledge of his civil liability based on all the lawsuits he's been involved in, and I think it's just irrelevant.
I don't see where all of that that you mentioned follows from the proposed testimony that the prosecution has requested here. I don't see that.
Our position is that he asserted the privilege because he had to. I mean, in order to follow his duties under the law, in order to avoid civil liability if he erroneously waived it, he had no choice but to assert the privilege. Moreover, we can then bring in Mr. Chalik to talk about his discussions with Mr. Brunon, where he indicated to Mr. Brunon how the privilege should be asserted, and all the negotiations to make sure Dr. Oziel asserted the privilege, and we get up into that collateral issue of the attorney meetings.
Well,
that's what happened at the inception of that case.
All of that is collateral. The only issue that is before the court is whether or not he did assert the privilege on behalf of the defendants. Not talking about asserting or not asserting the privilege or disclosing confidences involving anybody else, any other patients at some other time. We're talking about whether or not he asserted the privilege on behalf of the defendants in this case. And it doesn't get into all this collateral matter as to why he did it. It's just the fact that he did do it. And
No.
the why of it doesn't matter. It's the fact that he did do it. And it's offered by the prosecution to contradict the inference the defense has brought out that he had no concern for the defendant's privilege and did not do anything to protect that privilege. But that's all it is. It's not offered, you can argue any way you want, but it doesn't open the door to all this collateral matters that you talk about. Mr. Brunon is not going to be asked why he asserted the privilege or why Zoeller asserted the privilege. Just did he assert the privilege? That's all.
The people want to use it to bolster his credibility for the notion that he asserted the privilege because he's ethical. And that's not the truth.
Well, you don't know why he asserted the
But I
privilege.
do know why,
You
because
don't.
we were involved in the negotiations to make sure that he would. So the point is, it's not a neutral fact that he is, first of all, the fact that he asserted the privilege technically for the purpose of legal proceedings under 1524 and 1534 is irrelevant to this trial, okay? All it was the device by which the proper lawsuit was engaged so that we could then come forward and assert the privilege firsthand. But if the court is going to allow the inference to be raised that he asserted the privilege out of concern for his patient's rights, which we dispute, then I think we have to be entitled to show that that was not his motive and entitled to show the discussions and the meetings that preceded his filing that piece of paper in the Santa Monica court.
Well, there's no motive being attributed to Dr. Zoeller as to why he asserted the privilege. The only evidence being offered would be that the privilege was asserted on behalf of the defendants, and that's the end of it. And it does not open the door to all these areas that you're talking about. It just does not.
Why is that relevant that the privilege was asserted unless it's being shown, unless it's being offered to show that he acted ethically or that he has concern for them?
Because the defense has alluded to the fact that he did not assert the privilege and did not enforce the privilege in any way. And this is just the fact that he did. Oh, you have.
Why do we have it? We simply said he told Judelon Smith, and we dispute his reasons for telling her.
Well, then you're saying he violated the privilege, and this is an example of his asserting the privilege. As to why he did it, that's a separate issue, and it's not being proved by Mr. Brunon's
Judge, could
testimony.
I
Let's
add
assume
one?
hypothetically, let me just finish for one second. Let's assume hypothetically that we're right, just for a moment, if that can be imagined, that we are right, that he did not tell her for the reasons he said. He told her for purely personal reasons. Now he is caught, March 8th, okay? She goes to the police, she has blown his cover. His assertion of the privilege could be merely to cover himself, to make himself look good. It doesn't cut the way the court thinks it does.
That's a good argument, and you can make that argument to the jury. It doesn't open the door to evidence regarding that issue, however. Yes, Mr. Burke.
Well, I just wanted to add one aspect in addition to the material Ms. Abramson conveyed to the court, which relates to the legal negotiations around the assertion of the privilege. There's another line of attack that we would then come forward with in response to this implication that Dr. Zoeller is asserting the privilege on some ethical basis, which is we have witnesses who will testify that on lots of other occasions, in regards to lots of other clients, Dr. Zoeller consistently violated the privilege by disclosing information to third parties. And I think that's responsive to the testimony that's about to be elicited. It's directly responsive. And again, the court's concern for collateral issues, I think, comes into play.
All right, well, that would be a collateral issue and does not relate to whether or not he asserted the privilege. What he did with other patients and in other situations is collateral and is not relevant to this trial. The only issue here and the only issue we're discussing at great length is whether or not he asserted the privilege, not why he did it. And either side is foreclosed from introducing any evidence as to why the privilege was asserted. And it's just a fact that he did it. And nothing more is being offered by the prosecution. All right, anything else now in relationship to Mr. Brunon's testimony?
I think we were gonna inquire if Mr. Brunon's available to give his testimony this afternoon.
Yeah, that's a separate issue regarding your scheduling, Mr. Bruno.
Yes, sir. I relied on the 10 o'clock schedule and made an appointment for 1:30. I could be back at 2:30, though, if that's not inconvenient.
No, that most likely would work out since we have testimony before the Lyle Menendez jury anyway. Hopefully we don't have any glitches in regards to the tape recording and the transcript.
I do have one objection on that,
Yeah.
not on the tapes or the transcripts, but a general objection
Yeah.
to the admissibility of that tape, Your Honor. It's going to take approximately 50 minutes,
50 minutes, I mean, to play it.
50
Yeah.
minutes to play it. It is being offered on a consciousness of guilt theory. The prosecution has already availed itself of the opportunity to prove consciousness of guilt through the testimony of Detective Edmonds on the same issue. There is no other probative value to this tape, and we make an objection under Evidence Code Section 352 that the playing of a 50-minute tape would be an undue consumption of time, given how long the people have already had to prove up its case and the fact that it is not directly relevant to any issue that's in dispute in these proceedings.
And let me ask, has the tape been edited or reviewed by
Yes.
defense and objectionable material, inflammatory material or prejudicial material has been deleted?
Yes, and there's, with one exception, and the one exception is that the prosecution has deleted a discussion about a Rolex watch that Lyle Menendez was wearing. The discussion actually occurs at the end of the Eric Menendez tape, in which Lyle Menendez walks into the room and
May Mr. Brunon be excused until
Yeah,
2:30 so
yeah,
he
we'll
can
see
get
you
home?
at 2:30.
Thanks.
the two detectives tell him not to wear the watch when he comes to LA because according to page 39 of the transcript of the Eric Menendez conversation that the court looked at this morning, that the black guys have been following people home and robbing them for Rolex watches. And since there is conversation about that subject on the tape, which the prosecution is going to play, I want to bring this out as part of the entire conversation under 356 of the evidence code because it shows a lack of attempt by Lyle Menendez to hide his wearing of this watch, given the fact that he's having this conversation with the detectives about whether he should wear it in Los Angeles.
Okay, and what's the people's response?
Well, first of all, the conversation alluded to by Mr. Burt is not on this tape. It's on the tape of Eric Menendez. And I have already prepared the tape of Lyle Menendez's conversation. Mr. Burt told me several days ago that he wanted to put in the part from Eric Menendez as dealing with the fact that Detective Zoeller advised Lyle Menendez that he ought to be careful wearing his watch in Southern California because black people follow Rolex watch wearers home and steal them from them, and they have a conversation about that. And I believe that this was at the end of Eric's conversation, which was after Lyle's. Lyle's was first, then Eric's, and then this conversation. I was not going to offer the fact that Detective Zoeller saw him wearing the Rolex watch that day. That I was not going to offer that in his discussion or in any of the testimony about September the 17th. And I think that that there's no need for this kind of discussion to be presented in front of the jury. I think this may be a response to a prior ruling about Mr. Witkin and Lyle Menendez's description of Mr. Witkin. But it's not relevant to any issue that's going to be presented by this particular tape.
The watch itself was being worn by Lyle Menendez, is that right?
Yes.
According to the context of this, yes.
Was there a discussion between the two, the detective and Lyle Menendez, as to where and why and how the watch was acquired?
I don't believe, I'll have to look very carefully at the transcript again, but I don't believe there's any conversation on the tape I intend to play, which there is one paragraph, which is half a page, which we deleted, which dealt with the Calabasas burglaries. That's all that was deleted from this tape. everything else is as is, and I can look at it and see, but I don't recall that there's any discussion on this tape at all about the Rolex watches or
Well,
the purchase thereof.
The conversation which I'm going to elicit, and I'd be doing it not through playing the tape of the Eric Menendez conversation, but merely through questioning based on the transcript, is Detective Zoeller says, we're just going over the Rolex watch. Don't wear it at home. And then Detective Linehan says, don't wear that. And Detective Zoeller says, because someone will steal it. Linehan, don't wear that in LA. Zoeller, somebody will rob you of it. Lyle Menendez, really? Zoeller, just wear that casually in LA. Lyle Menendez, really? Zoeller, the black guys have been following people home and robbing them of the Rolex watches. And then Linehan says they get him at gunpoint and take the watch. And then it goes on further discussion. My point in bringing that up being that he's openly and notoriously wearing the watch in the presence of two Beverly Hills police detectives, having a casual conversation about it to rebut the inference that this was some sort of murder for financial gain, which was brought out through the testimony of Miss Maher.
Which watch was this, the gold
He had the gold.
or the stainless steel?
Yeah, because Linehan then says they're asking for gold Rolex watches. So I assume from that statement that he's looking at the gold Rolex watches.
Well, is this a indication that the defendant voluntarily spoke of the Rolex watch or just walked into the interview and the police were there and he was wearing it? I don't understand where it shows that he was openly and notoriously discussing it or wearing it other than the police officers talked to him about it. If the police bring it up, how does that show his state of mind?
Well, it doesn't matter who brings it up. The fact is that in September, many months after these killings, he is in the presence of the police, and the circumstances are Detective Zoeller and Linehan are at the house when Lyle Menendez drives up in a car, and he walks into the house and interviews with them with the watch on.
Okay, well, that could be relevant evidence as far as whether he knew the police were there and whether he had an opportunity to get rid of the watch prior to the interview, if that is to be brought out by the defense, if you feel it's probative. But my question is, what relevance does it have what the police officers told him about wearing it in Los Angeles? What does it prove?
Well, it proves.
You say it's part of a conversation, but what does it prove?
What it proves is that he's having this casual conversation about a piece of evidence that the people point to is so important in showing murder for financial gain. And it has a tendency and reason to rebut the people's inference that this was some plot to obtain the parents' money. It seems unlikely that someone who was murdering someone for profit is going to carry on a casual conversation with a police officer about an item that the people draw such importance from.
Well, who brought up the subject of the watch?
The detectives did.
Well, what choice did the defendant have when the police say, you've got that Rolex watch, don't wear it to Los Angeles?
First of all,
what was his option?
The circumstances were that the interview took place with Lyle Menendez first. He then leaves the room and the interview with Eric Menendez takes place. So there's a certain period of time when Lyle Menendez has the opportunity to go away upstairs, leave the watch upstairs, and instead he comes back down wearing the watch and this conversation takes place.
No, I'm not talking about wearing the watch. You can argue lots of different inferences as to the circumstance of his wearing the watch and his state of mind one way or another. But my question is, what does it have to do with the conversation, which apparently is basically the police officers making statements to the defendant? And what choice did he have other than sit there as they made those statements? It's not an adoptive admission situation where there's some accusation being made. They're just making statements and he's sitting there listening to it.
I guess my comment to that would be the same as when I objected to the admissibility of the conversation about the little Jewish guy comment with Mr. Witkin. The court said that was part of the conversation and the transaction, and it comes out as part of the context in which these observations took place and the conversation which Lyle Menendez had with the officer. I don't think it's fair to just have the officer say, did Lyle Menendez make certain statements about the watch?
I don't think the people are offering any statements about the watch, as I understood it.
That's correct.
Well, but they're offering the part of the conversation, the part that they want on September 17th. And I think I'm entitled under Evidence Code Section 356 to bring out the entire conversation that was had on that date. And this is part of the conversation. The rest of the conversation relates to the events surrounding August 20th and up to and including the time when they're interviewing.
Right. Haven't there been certain things excised from the conversation at your request?
The only thing that's been excised is a reference to the Calabasas burglary. That's the one piece of information that was excised.
Okay, so the entire conversation is not being presented to the jury. There is a part of it already that has been removed.
The entire conversation on this subject matter was the point I was trying to make. That is the events surrounding August 20th and following. The officers' questions are wide-ranging, covering the fishing trip and the events of August 21st, what Lyle Menendez has been doing in the intervening period between August 21st and the time when they're interviewing him in September. The interview opens with them asking him about his activities and whether he's going back to school. The Calabasas burglary took place in 1988. And it's my position that the subject matter that the people are putting into evidence has to do with the events on and after August 20th, 1989. Okay. So this is relating to the same subject matter.
I have a case.
I'm sorry?
I have a case to cite to the court and counsel.
Yes.
It's from the annotated code 356. People versus Gambos, Gambos, 1970 case, 5 Calap 3rd, 187, which indicates that this section, meaning 356, allowing further inquiry into otherwise inadmissible conversation only where it relates to same subject and is necessary to make already introduced conversation understood, requires that such additional evidence be excluded if not relevant to the conversation already in evidence, and that additional evidence must shed light upon that which is already admitted and be necessary to make earlier conversation understood or to explain it. The conversation that precedes Eric Menendez's is offered under Evidence Code 1220 as admission. It's offered against him. We are not offering the further conversation against him. It is not relevant to the prior conversation. It is not an adoptive admission. It is not, the defense can't offer it against their own client, so 1220 doesn't apply to them. And I think this is an attempt to introduce otherwise inadmissible evidence for an improper purpose.
All right, regardless of the Gambos case, let me rule so we can resolve this matter. Alluding to the Witkin testimony or reference to it is inapposite. That was a situation where statements were attributed to the defendant, not to some other person. And the statements attributed to the defendant had to do with his state of mind that the person he had hired to investigate the computer was an individual who could not be located, could not be identified because he was somebody that the defendant had selected and was basically anonymous as far as the outside world was concerned. And he gave a description of the individual, which coincides to some extent with the individual who is the witness and the person who actually did the work on the computer. And it's connecting evidence, and it's entirely different and is in no way analogous to the situation that we are now discussing. As presented to me, the reference to the Rolex watch is one that is isolated and separate from the overall conversation. There is nothing else in the conversation that has been presented to me that relates to the Rolex watch, other than what has been read to me by Mr. Burt. And the conversation that Mr. Burt referred to is really words uttered by the police officers, not by the defendant, and does not fall within the language of Section 356, calling for the entirety of a conversation when a portion of it is introduced. And regardless of that, Section 352, the Evidence Code, is still appropriate to deal with evidence that is subject to arguable inclusion under Section 356 of the Evidence Code, and the court finds that the probative value of this evidence that has been referred to by Mr. Burt is substantially outweighed by its potential of prejudice and confusion of issues, and therefore the court would not permit it to be introduced.
Judge, in the interest of time, I did not read the entire conversation to the court, and I'm wondering if I could provide the court with the entire conversation, both for the purposes of making a record on this and also so the court can see. There are other statements in here, for instance, Lyle Menendez asking the officers where he could sell the watch for $2,500 because they say to him, the black guys are stealing them, selling them for $2,500, and he says, well, where could I sell mine for $2,500?
Well, the people are not offering that, as I understand it.
No,
That's the conversation that took place at a different
No, I
sequence.
understand they're not offering it. That's a problem. That's why I'm offering it. But
Yeah, well,
I also, Your Honor, is if the court is ruling this is outside the scope of the September 17th conversation, I would be offering this as part of our case in chief. In other words, if the problem here is it isn't connected into the previous conversation, I think it's independently admissible to rebut the conversations that were elicited at the time of the purchase of the watches through Miss Mayer.
well, I'd have to hear your argument further on that. We can defer that until we get to that point.
Right.
And you can relate back to the specific testimony of Ms. Mahar and why you think it's relevant, but I don't think we should do that now.
No, but there are, I want to offer at this point the pages 38 through 41 and ask the court whether there are any statements in here that I can elicit through the cross-examination of Detective Zoeller.
Okay, why don't you give it to the clerk and I'll review it, 38 through 41.
38 through 41,
Okay.
and it's
Okay.
all set on the page that the court would need to look.
Okay, all right, we'll be in recess until 1:30 then.
Who have been waiting around for a day and a half. We're all concerned that we may not get to the issue for which they are here right now, which is the 402 issue. And so in consulting with Mr. Weiner and checking his schedule and with Ms. McPhee, what we've asked the court to do is to order them back for next Thursday, August 19th. They're both able to be here at that time. And that way we could at least get out from under the pressure and the financial burden of their being around.
All right. My suggestion is, as we discussed before, when the issue was first presented to me, that if possible, we can litigate the admissibility of this witness's testimony based upon the report that was presented to the court by Mr. Burt, and at least preliminarily resolve that to the point of perhaps giving counsel guidance as to whether the witness should return or not, if there is additional burden in having her come back.
Yes, I know, but so long as she's ordered by this court to return, then if I need her, she can come back. So I would ask the court to do that, order her and her attorney to return. Obviously, if we litigate it in advance of Thursday, and I'm hoping we will, and if at that point we no longer seek to have her testify, we'll call them off. Since we have to pay to get them here, they won't be here unless we arrange it, so.
Okay. All right, that's fine.
So would you order?
Sure. Where is she?
Ms. McPhee, would you stand up?
All right, you're excused, ordered to return August the
19th.
This court at 9 a.m.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, John. I'll be, thank you, Cynthia.
All right, you ready?
The court was also, I provided the court with a partial
You
transcript.
want to mark that as an exhibit? If
Yes.
you want to make it part of the record, we can make it. Exhibit,
I already marked the exhibits for this afternoon. Could we make his exhibit 134?
have you already marked them?
Yes, I marked the tape and the transcript as 131 and 132 before you came out.
It should be 132 and 133.
Oh, well, I was close. Okay, so could he,
The tape will be 132 and the transcript 133. And this extra transcript, for identification purposes only, is 134.
okay, that's 131. This is 132. I did it right. I just read it wrong.
And the inquiry, Mr. Burt, had to do with what you could ask during cross-examination today of the witness.
Correct.
What is it that you wanted to ask?
Well, I wanted to ask whether he made all those statements that are contained on pages 38 through 41 and whether Lyle Menendez gave the answers which are reflected in those pages of the transcript.
And what is the relevance?
As I indicated to the court this morning, I don't have anything to add to that unless the court wants me to re-argue it.
Well, if it's being offered by the defendant, it primarily is the statement of the police officers and very little responsive conversation both by Lyle Menendez and Eric Menendez to what the officers were telling them. It's really, at this point, not relevant evidence to any issue that I could see in dispute, and is offered by the defense as some sort of hearsay or state of mind evidence, not hearsay, state of mind evidence. Is that basically what you're?
Yes, it would be offered for the non-hearsay purpose of showing the lack of consciousness of guilt that was raised by the purchase of the watch testified to by Ms. Mayer, and also to illustrate the further point that he was being perfectly cooperative with the officers on September 17th in discussing this matter. And lastly, that he was offering or asking the officers how he could get rid of the watch for $2,500, which is responsive to the greed theme that has been stressed by the prosecution throughout the testimony. And my theory of admissibility is as both non-hearsay for the purposes I indicated, and also to the extent that the statements are offered to prove their truth, that it's admissible under Evidence Code Section 356 as part of the whole conversation that is being elicited by the prosecution on direct examination.
Well, as far as the state of mind theory, it doesn't, in my view, establish the defendant's state of mind. As we discussed, it is basically police officers talking to him, and he had no choice but to participate in that conversation. It doesn't really reflect on his state of mind as to acquiring the item, which is the issue here, as to his state of mind when he acquired it. The fact that he had the watch, if there is some evidence offered that he knew the police were there and continued to wear the watch and had no consciousness of it in that regard, that is evidence that might be relevant. But the conversation itself is really, if anything, the state of mind of the police officers in regards to some crimes that are occurring in Los Angeles and not relevant to the defendant's state of mind. So on that theory and the other theories articulated, the court finds it's not relevant or probative evidence, and therefore, at this point, it would not permit it.
All right, Your Honor, in light of the court's ruling, I would have an additional motion, which is a motion to exclude those portions of the transcript that people are about to play, which are long declarative sentences by the police inspectors to Lyle Menendez as being not relevant to any issue in the case, because there are statements that they're making reflective of their state of mind throughout the course of this transcript. And on the same rationale, I would move to exclude those statements.
Well, are the people offering those to show the state of mind of the police officers or the state of mind of the defendant in response to any statements that were made?
Well, to the extent that they're offering long narrative statements by the police officers to show Lyle Menendez's state of mind, it's our position that it's not relevant for that purpose.
People wish to be heard on that.
Just briefly, Your Honor, these statements by the police are part of a conversation in which the defendant engaged. Without the questions of the police officers, his answers or his comments will lose their meaning. It'd be like excluding questions and cross-examination and just going with the responses of the witness.
All right, Mr. Burt, do you want to?
I submit the matter, Your Honor.
All right, your request to excise the statements of the police for the reasons you articulated tonight. All right, you ready to proceed?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, this,
So I have the transcript marked. I think I marked it as Exhibit 133.
Yeah.
Okay.
this will be the Lyle Menendez jury, and we'll get that jury in, and the jury books are in the seats, so we'll have the jurors.
Your Honor, may we do just one brief housekeeping thing?
Sure.
Exhibit number 43, which is the transcript of a conversation on August 21st, there was one word that was changed in that by mutual consent of the district attorney and I. We put in, since we had a disagreement about what that word was, we put both words in, and we have the revised transcript. So I'd like to substitute the new version for Exhibit 43 for the old version.
Yes. Is that agreed by the prosecution?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, then the new version will be submitted to the clerk, and she'll substitute that for the Exhibit 43, and we'll replace it.
Your Honor,
And Mr. Burt, as far as the portion that of Exhibit 134 that we have been discussing here, as I said before, if it has relevance to Ms. Mahar's testimony and it is to be brought out by the defense, we'll deal with it at that point when you show me the transcript of her testimony, how it relates.
All right, thank you.
Your Honor, as long as we're doing housekeeping, I now have a transcript of the 911 tape. I also have enough copies for all the jurors. I don't propose to replay the tape, but I would like to have this transcript available for the deliberations. It has been approved.
Well, the transcript should be an exhibit.
Yes, I'd like to mark it as such.
All right, well, as have counsel for both defendants seen it and heard
Yes.
it? And,
Ms. Morrissey's the one that made the changes that I incorporated.
okay, it'll be marked 135.
Thank you.
All right, the jury is in the courtroom, and good afternoon to you all. I have apologies to make for not getting to you yesterday afternoon and not getting to you this morning, but things got carried away and other matters had to be dealt with, and they took a little longer than anticipated. I'm sorry for that. We have evidence at this point to offer. The people are offering as to the defendant, Lyle Menendez only. That's why we have you here at this point. And then after that, there'll be testimony where both juries will be present. Before we get along, there's a question that I've been asking throughout these proceedings, and I haven't had a chance to ask you lately, so let me do it now. Whether or not any of you have seen or heard anything about this case, other than what you've already told me in earlier proceedings. If you have, would you raise your hand? Anybody? All right, nobody has. Okay, then let's proceed with the trial, and the people may call their next witness.
People call Detective Zoeller to the stand.
You solemnly swear that the testimony you may give in the cause opportunity before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Just take the stand and state your name for the record.
Leslie H. Zoeller, Zoeller.
Detective Zoeller, on the 17th of September of 1989, did you have a conversation with Lyle Menendez in the city of Cranberry in the state of New Jersey?
Yes, I did.
Was it at approximately 3 o'clock in the afternoon?
Yes.
And was that conversation tape recorded?
Yes, it was.
Your Honor, I have your tape, which I have previously marked as Exhibit 132. I also have a transcript of that tape, which has been marked as Exhibit 133. May those be so marked at this time?
Yes.
Thank you. And I have copies, 18 copies of the transcript. May I distribute those to the jurors, please?
Yes.
At this time, I'd like to play the tape, which has been marked as Exhibit 132. I believe there's a stipulation that the court reporter need not transcribe the tape. Thank you.
Time is 3 p.m. Myself and Detective Zoeller, I'm Detective Linehan, Beverly Hills Police Department, are conducting an interview with Lyle Menendez.
I need to stop the tape for a moment. I failed to identify the voices. Detective Zoeller, I've started the tape, and there's an identification by Detective Linehan. Was he your partner at that time?
Yes, he was.
And I take it your voice also appears on this tape?
Yes, it does.
In addition, was Lyle Menendez present?
Yes.
During the period of time that you had this interview, was it inside of a residence?
Yes, it was.
And do you recall whose residence it was where this tape was made?
Yes, it was Teresita and Carlos Baral's house.
And who are Teresita and Carlos Baralt as they relate to this case, please?
Teresita is Jose Menendez's sister, and Carlos is her husband.
And at portions of this tape, is it apparent that there are other people in the household while
Yes.
the tape is made?
Yes.
Thank you. I'll continue now. I'm sorry, Your Honor.
His uncle's home in Cranberry, New Jersey. I only put this here because, unfortunately, oh, it doesn't have that great of a microphone. I will just put it here, huh? I don't think I could. I would like to tell and concentrate on anything on building the court. Yeah, I don't know about that. I have to go to the what have you been doing? You think that's the one? Yeah, well, just time in school, and your friends there, and then trying to come back and see you. Yeah, I've been trying to get my mind off things in some ways, and then at the same time, I'm kind of like things that I know the other way. Games, and there's a lot of stuff like that, but and everything might be going to the west, so yeah, we'll probably be going out there, house is good now, your uncle was saying that Carol Cole might buy that house. You heard that about? I think companies treat you as family. We talked to Margie, a lay of she's I would expect that from people that have been in that for years. We've got to the company more with my father. Yeah, very clear about, just because they treat you that way. We spoke to Donovan from Princeton last year. He left a message for us to basically get a hold of you. And while we were in the road, we just got by where we were. And we wanted to make sure that you knew that Pretrial was working at a place called Foxy in Fort Alabama. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew that he was there and he would give him a call. So he had his phone number. That's a very nice guy. Okay. Questions again. I apologize again at a time. It's just things that questions that we have that we don't have the answers to. Saturday you went fishing. You know, deep sea fishing. But remember what time they went? The time you left? Yeah, we left around 3 p.m. or 3 a.m. fishing on Saturday. But then that's it. The world good there. I'm just saying. Over that. Which was and what kind of return home? Return back home if they have home. much better to kind of get on through it, but it was very easy. Maybe I could go. Early, Sunday morning? Yeah, early tonight. Yeah. So, it was late. Yeah, we got on the mirror, but I had to do that. Maybe more of that. Everybody will wait for Sunday, yeah. So, accordingly, it's like, don't do it. I don't really like to kind of fun that. Sometimes it's something like that. My dad did it, but the sleep like had a you know, stuff. And that's not a picture. And my mother is like, back about it. What kind of job is that? That's why I use a little bit of it. Sometimes depends. If I got to finish this the next day, that's the time I still need to go there. Like, how early do you think you got it? How early do you think you got it? Normal, nothing. And your parents, they generally have a hand with the home downstairs. Usually my brother and I, if we don't want to be in the same room. We go upstairs and put a faucet on that TV, or they we out of the house, then we sit out there and go and do it. And yeah, my dad falls asleep and we just like that. My mother is insomnia and I just kind of sleep tired with pretty well and pretty good. So they definitely usually hold each other in the house and it's sort of like that. So if we're in the room out there, they'll often fall asleep. If it's a movie that they're interested in, is the three of you have dinner, or the four of you have dinner at 9 o'clock? Usually we have a formal dinner, we're not having it. And then after that, I don't like to do on because I'm very sick of it and usually if I use it out of that. So that I don't know. There's plenty of food that I think I need to work plenty of these something maybe to bring up on I said the number one food so we don't know. It was more like a walk back and forth. We always do that. Yeah, no. The quarter phone space case, really by the bar there. Where is the receiver number? No, it's just a lot, but I'm going to leave it ready. She often used that cylinder phone. The wire phone for the quarters. It's just house quarter phone. So we're not using that right now. one in next to the bar, the pillow there, on the pillow. People in the pillow that's quiet the rain and stuff. No, no, it just be done. Accidentally. Other than that, you wouldn't expect from the bar. Who's in there? Someone graduated like 50, 50, 50, that house. They never got me actually, never maybe, no, that's what you got. Your dad's car. Oh, it was in your dad's car? Talking to Terry said that you called him, and it was essential that you talked to him that night. Remember what that was? You called him? No, it was just, kind of got me to go to this one Texas thing. And then, we just, I was kind of, now, so, I do something, and I haven't talked to him. 2 weeks, 2 weeks, yeah, 2 weeks. So I just had lots of things going on with, that I wanted to talk to him about, but mostly my brother doesn't get up and get out too much. So really all that, so it's kind of ready to go. But, yeah, quite a nice one. Really good, everybody. Keep that before, this is something to recommend. I go out with Terry, that my brother. That's the thing. Yeah, good thing. What's up, man? Originally had, you and Eric gonna go to the show and just come home, or what? No, I know you had made arrangements to meet Terry, but, so we got that, so we go around the show, go to the movie, and we'll be about ready to play. You know that night was when we did leave the house? Have you ever seen that? Yeah, we saw it one time before, and the original went to the last to kill, we saw that, we saw that, we were coming to the time, to the time when you went, you actually went to it. Yeah, at least 2 of us, yeah. I would say, how much I like to movies too, so I like that, but, if they did, that movie is so it's very, it wouldn't be very much to go there, so which was rolled out that way, right, because that's the film, so, okay, so you saw that, so it's not that much. You never played a movie with him? You got it, I was able to play Terry there. Yeah, Terry, so earlier, I told him I'm meeting there or whatever, I guess. That's the thing that's probably a lot later than he had expressed, so it was a long time. And by the time we got there, so it wasn't up, so I just put the other, so we looked around for him for a while, and then I thought, if he's doing that, he's already doing it, because it's a long time. You don't know what to do with the big stuff. I think that, I think you're right, and I would say, I've never seen him in the club because I remember afterwards that, you know, that we started the after and then so in it. The only time you saw Terry from the thing, you couldn't find him after that. So, got lost point, and coming back. So, when you came directly back to the house from Santa Monica, I think all Perry did was one meeting up the street picked up, and went back to the house. Yeah, they went back to the house. They moved, what did you pick up the house? My brother, I do very good. What name that I do with him? Definitely. You know what name get back from? This idea was made cheesecake actually years ago. I don't know. Did you grow up this year? Yeah. Grow up for it. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I haven't left yet. Okay. Things that we need to do is more often, right? All right, and stuff I'm doing. Okay, great. Okay. When you got back to the house, remember how long it was before you saw the police? So, right away. You remember whether Eric was on the phone at the same time you were on the phone? And you told me something? I don't know about that. I mean, he was certain one. I used to realize, and you realize from where. Anything? No. And, after you called me, yeah, he was on the phone, and I don't remember, I never talked to him like that. It's just a fun that he told me more than anything. Okay. Just a picture earlier. We heard that just from different people who use that kind of treatment, that Eric was actually the one that landed something. Yeah, I mean, but he was ahead of you, or he was interaction. He was ahead of me. I guess he was ahead of me. I don't know. I didn't expect the family. I went there. It was kind of come to it. You know, I heard that way. far into the temporary screen you went down and how far into the window you could. I went in there, and I put it out. Oh, yeah. I couldn't check out through there. It was trying to take care of my brother, but I was trying to figure it out. I remember the thing still there, and I went out back to check it for me. Your aunt had mentioned someone going to fill out because they were conservative. You mentioned that you felt bad that you didn't go and check the mother. Yeah. So, one thing your mother was gone. So if you have any concerns, if you could have gone over and say, like being there this 5 minutes ago, because we were at the scene. Without getting into it, there was no, they both sides. Right? There was no good right by everyone. Up to the corner, people, I'm telling you, so that you don't think that you have to take didn't seem like anyone going because they were afraid that people were there. I saw the ambulance, nobody was going in. I skimmed on you for a while, but I realized what's going on. Good idea, but it's like smoke. That's all I thought that happened last night. You know, and, I was, feeling pretty honest. I thought we were going the other way, and I should have asked them out, and see somebody come out. They went in right, they kind of took them, because tactically go in. They went in right in that room and checked with them. And then we went to the corner, the inclave, to the alpha. And the guy said, you being a person in the room, or Eric, would have mattered to you. And so then, is there any signs of negotiation going on, or anything, nothing unusual? Did the maid normally have there even coming off with the return? Just the maid or other people? You said the day we were there, while you were there, you said you slept up in that, or you slept up on the bed and went to the bedroom. Why is that? I think I was actually independent to the place to see. And occasionally sleep the night shift upstairs. Somebody got on your way. We got there the back guest house. Wasn't much. That moment how it is. You just leave the door thing. No, I don't think we were the door thing. Because I never thought about that. So we were before. So we would be online. your family is, you met with me, what's in Beverly? Not really at the time, too. It's been a lot of work time, but just unfortunately don't run. Because I understand that they haven't done that, but whether it's the fact, I really was good. Any problems recently between you and me? Well, really, lock the door, and I didn't, I forgot a key, and I had to wake up to open the door. I got that, but you have to make it up, so I locked the door, it's more than the other keys. So did you normally come home and go to the main house? I guess they're like, you didn't break that. Really real close. Myself, sometimes I look around if I had anything to take out the phone, bring my room, normally, you normally leave the gate open. I leave the gate open, I'm not close to it become natural. I try to keep it in colors like open on my community chat, but if I forgot that, you're even telling me that there's no to do about it. So then we try to have that standard. But it's the rules on education. How are you waking up as opposed to waking up and running around? Which keeps to be the one that would wake up and come down. Yeah, my mom wakes up like that. My dad wakes up pretty much too. Just like it was after. When you first started working that night, you did something about your dad being very, very aware of noise that just to address their safety and your dad was kind of wake up pretty easily. So the mother, she also took it as far as walk downstairs and check to see if noise and go outside and check to see something like that. She was pretty good like that. I was actually weird about that. I never was something with it. If she didn't noise and go, if she walked up and go, hey, we'd like to go. That's the way I did it. So that house was still locked itself out of there. So rather than check the house over for long, just go do that. Don't have any of that on that. So maybe not right now. The other thing was I said you called for real make sure I know I was pretty never slept well and especially in California so something later. That was just really good and I think other things that try not to move into the California country has been good. Well, always a and really doing it down. But I'm not sure when that becomes a really business. We know about this behavior.
Your Honor, for the record, I've turned the tape over and we're now on at the top of page 18. I understand the tape is very difficult to hear, but that's where we are. And perhaps if I know that the second half of the tape, the voices drop off even more on occasion. So perhaps if any of the jurors have trouble, maybe they could signal, we could stop it and let everyone know where we are. Would that be acceptable? Okay, because
I'm sorry.
is that all right?
Yeah, just if anyone can't
If you get,
follow what page we're supposed to be on.
Could the court also give an admonition about this transcript? And
Yes. As I've said before, in regards to transcripts, they are only an aid to your listening to the tape. The tape itself is the evidence of the conversation, and a transcript only assists you in understanding what's being said on the tape. So although you do have the transcript and it is there for you to use, it's just an aid to listening to the tape recording. So at any time you have difficulty hearing it, let us know and we'll certainly play it back or stop and let you catch up so you can follow along.
I'm going to rewind it.
Yeah, if there's something that points to somebody being that upset, or the business deal that you or Eric got involved in, or it's something that you know about, or that we should know about, and that we can check it out, because, you know, I don't care. You know, what I don't think, we don't care about you about being involved in it, per se. I mean, it's something that, you know, someone shouldn't be involved in it. I don't care about that, about you or your death, or anything about it. Everyone should be as truthful as possible. I was thinking some of the other ways that we don't really not to have for the press and so on. Nothing gets out to the press. Everything that you've read or heard on the news is not from my case. We give the information to our press liaison so that we want to release. The only thing that we have authorized release that has been released from our police department is that the deaths, who they are, where it happened, the occasion, as far as 722, you know, which we only get the orders off, and that's what we do like that, and the cause of death. The cause of death for us was the medical contract. Somebody that either paid somebody off in the coroner's office, as far as we know, so we can touch anybody. But, you know, they initially came out and said, oh, it's something else to do, so forth. And, you know, that was their release. But we obtained a lot of information, and we don't even tell our press players on that, because we are responsible for this. When somebody's caught, hopefully, when somebody's caught, especially if we get a confession from them, we want to have our case to the court. We want to know that when we get the confession, that only that person and us will be answered. Or, God forbid, we have some guy come in and say it's really different. And these guys want to tell all that he's really been bothered with whatever. But we won't have that information nobody else knows about, so that we can either ask him or her, or ask that person, you know, direct questions, get a direct answer, if they can answer, or, you know, there's enough information that we know that nobody else knows, that they want to get that person, or such that. So, as far as you telling us things or anything that the press, obviously, Marcy's told us quite a few things that must have to know that it's up to, yeah, our supervisor. When this thing goes to trial, the only people that will be handling the trial will be being an individual jury. So there's no need to tell all these other people. And we tell our supervisors, they like to update on our investigation, and we tell them that they want to hear basically, well, we contact this person, and so forth, and then back to this person, and so forth. We feel that the investigation is going in this direction, and this is why. So that's the only thing we do. That's one of our supervisors. So the integrity of the investigation, you have to realize a little bit further, 3/4 of the people that we talked to when we spoke to New York and all, but throughout that was in the paper that it's just constantly not shit. And where they get this stuff, they always come up with, well, we have a police-related person, or somebody close to the investigation. I don't know where they're getting it, but it's not going to come out. And if we find out that it's coming from anybody, it's not a storm with anybody, it will be fine. And so it's not stuff to make, they will be fine. But nobody knows that the investigation will be enough. I can watch internet, and believe me, it has not come from our police department. Particularly, it has not come from the It has not come from the police department. They have the data of the crime. You were there later when the TV was on, and they were running up and down the street as neighbors were coming out of their houses to interview these neighbors. So that's the type of people we're dealing with. That's tragic. Pretty pathetic that these people have to shoot a meme or to sell a paper or get advertising for a big program. That's the truth, and nothing gets released by us. In fact, the coroner's office released entirely too much as far as we're concerned. And we had our chief write the coroner, who had right in the had him write in the letter. This is before we went to the autopsy. And he told me in those terms, they didn't release any information from what the autopsy. And even after the autopsy, we went up and spoke to their way of person. And he said, this is what you're going to release, and nothing else. And from then on, he went on, that's all they said. And because the investigation and everything. The news people have probably 100 investigative reporters that go out and talk to the villain, they talk to the person that they know of all the time with LAPD or the FBI or private or IRS or whoever else. And then they say that they hear this or they hear that, and it's reliable source says. And it's all hearsay. That's substantiated and because somebody said, make it okay. But half of the stuff in the paper, one, is not true. Then 90% of the stuff in the paper is stuff that did not come from that police department. So that's all the paper needs to cover their ass. Is for them to say that, or for them to go and talk to this guy over here, and this guy says one thing, whether it's right or not, they don't care. This newspaper says, we got it from a reliable point, from a reliable source. They never have to cover it because they get all the time, too. They'll call and say, hey, did you choose this? Did you choose this? We're going to print this. Please call. We cannot say yes or no, that's true. By not saying anything, they don't presume that to be necessarily true or false. They just presume we have no comment. And then the more sensational, the more papers they sell. Yeah, oh, really? And that's something completely out of our control. And we can't go to the newspaper and tell them not to report it because they'll say, well, then what should we report? And we're not making any comments. You're saying you don't want to report because it's the truth, or you're saying you don't want to report because it is. We can't say one way or the other, Well, then we're going to report it. That's where we are. We just don't make any comment at all, hoping that what we don't say is going to kind of try an actual death. And, they keep trying to dig stuff up. Now I understand they dug up about the gang stuff. That was in the paper. investigate reporters. That's why we investigate reporters from New York, from New Jersey, but they're threatened to read the papers. Yeah, it was related. So I don't know what we read about it, but I'll tell you what's going on. My brother-in-law is going on. That's fine. You know, so, if you want to know anything you really want to know, would be what it is. I'll tell you right now that we have made mistakes. And for us to call you and say, gee, we're doing this and doing this, and we're not doing this, you know, kind of, it's useless until we have something. Anytime you have any questions, please call. If you hear something and you say, hey, you know, we hope that we have the report of you and your brothers, that you can pick up the phone and say, hey, I heard this. And we'll tell you straight out, we're not going to lie to you. We're not going to lie to you. There's something. So really, because I know. And nothing we can do is it's serious damage for you, obviously, because of your parents, but you as parents, you know, face it, they're in damage control for their stockholders. We talk about damaging to them. And we get calls from them too, wanting to find out if that thing is true or not. I mean, I got a call the second day after it happened from somebody in the New York Stock Exchange wanting to find out if it was and because the stock is taking that. The stockholders are going to hold on to a company that's going to the underworld. You know, they're going to cash out right away. So it's that's the company hired a private investigative agency called Zoeller to review that money. Of course, they're after nothing but protect parallel. So it's either they have an involvement in the buying stuff, so we bring it back on them. Which we are working, I think they hand in hand, but we're not. We're letting them do all their work, and then we'll get with them and see what they've got. It's important, as I said, for us to know what's going on and what areas to look at. Because that's really good. You know, we're doing that kind of stuff. And that makes it navigator. You know, and I know that it would be just to be away from it, but to have the stuff accepted and so the only way that we can see you calling, if your dad did something like that, report it and period. And then we got involved in something that he didn't know where he was involved in report. So your dad's type where he hears somebody present a deal case within 20 minutes, you know, yeah, your neck, and you do. And somebody might come and say, hey, this is what we got for you, let's do a deal with a little bit of pornography, and do that right away with a college so they knew that ain't part of it. But they might have put something out, I don't know. And I got other people that so what am I doing? This is hard to do. So it's good. Any of that position, we get a lot of people that say, once you drive it, business to be improved. If it had been a Goku coming in with $200,000 down by the big play, they had no conflict there, like bank and the institutions that we were involved. Because of the media, because everything that's going on out there, that's why there was something that happened 6 months earlier, and you were Goku and you wanted to buy something that had no conflict there. They do all the time. It's not just businesses, man. It's not here now because of everything they use. Darcy said that when your father was on his last trip, that here's what she said. She said that he had called in the morning, she was real upset at Lyle. That he was the night of 16th for the night of 15th to 16th. If I could move you and move you for Tuesday. And said that Lyle had got up at 7 o'clock in the morning, not to do it. He was upset about that. But we did it so fast, it was over the roof. And we got too. You know, it's going to be upset. It wasn't that I had on the phone, for sure. You would have called him out from your phone, but their phone, hospital, I can't remember exactly what one was at the site, but whatever I was at the site, we called it 261 long back there. It was really unusual. I didn't invite him from one year, so I thought that thing was getting all the things out. Just I was over there in the morning and I didn't mention anything more than, that she was upset because she stayed up all night. Largely brought back home, but not like it's so, you know, we didn't give any more information than that, but she was always so nice to do, so we gathered down home. So we do that. So it's a little more than that. That's all this guy is. And we open up. We open up and do is just like another girl. That's not the skill that we heard from this guy. We heard that all the way from, about Jamie and Christy and dealing with Chad, Chad, and we heard about one girl, a couple of people that you don't even know it was true. One girl said that she got her pregnant and your dad paid her off or something. She came to your dad. She had a contact and your dad got put in something like that. But the woman was pretty much, I didn't know what that was. Your dad was right over there and your dad seemed to think that they were video recorder on camera. Yeah. And your dad said, type of thing. Right, I don't want to take it. You end up paying for it? You end up paying for it. Sure. One of the things that if I knew they needed it, I knew that we thought it was very good stuff. So I'd buy it and then I'd accept it. And decide. Well, I think it's in that, but it's going to take that. Before the memorial service, you get out and talk to your office. Go to the memorial service. The company said, if you dad said it, so that the company said it, yeah, it was. That's the best way to do it. That's usually who's the third watch for? Only about that's all we're asking. If we sit back and accept it and read into it, and it becomes straightforward and answer that, and it's good up to it. How about the bodyguard that you had here? Oh, it's very solid. Like him, it's like one of them FBI, they're up around suits and they maybe with the bad folks or I don't know if they tell you about the van and she was that she was all in. So the little what I can do is just you people. figured that out along with, yeah, information. So I don't, you know, so, you know, I have to ask that, Okay, Lyle, that's all our questions. Do you have any questions for us? Time is 5 minutes to 4, 17.
Detective Zoeller, I just have a couple questions for you about the tape. When you went to the Barral's house that day, did you have an appointment with Lyle Menendez?
No, I did not.
Did you have an appointment with anybody at that house?
Yes.
And who was that with?
Had an appointment to see Mr. and Mrs. Baralt.
Did you have any knowledge before you got there that Lyle Menendez would even be there?
No, it was actually my impression that he was on the West Coast at the time.
In the tape, there's some mention of a person named Marzi. Was Marzi Mr. Menendez's secretary at the time of his death?
Yes.
There's also mention of a company or a concern called Carol Co. I think it was around page 25. Was Carol Co. the company that Mr. Menendez worked for? Or was it the owner of the company that Mr. Menendez worked for?
Yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Cross-examination. Detective Zoeller, was Eric Menendez present in the house when you were conducting this interview?
Yes.
And is it true that, as you just said, you went there to interview the aunt and uncle, correct?
That's correct.
Not knowing that either Eric or Lyle was there, correct?
That's correct.
And when you got inside the house, were you informed that Eric Menendez was upstairs sleeping?
Yes, that's correct.
And is it true that at that time you asked the aunt and uncle to go get Eric to bring him down?
That's not correct as stated.
Could you tell me what the sequence was in terms of
During
how
the
you came into contact with Eric Menendez?
Yes. During the interview of Mrs. Baralt, we had mentioned that we, and by we, it's my partner, Detective Linehan, and myself, we had not spoken to Eric or Lyle, and she had mentioned, oh, Eric's upstairs sleeping. Would you like me to wake him so you can interview him? And we said, yes.
All right. Did you interview the Baralts first, or did you proceed right to the interview with Eric?
No, we interviewed the Baralts first.
And you had a tape recorder with you when you walked into the house that day?
That's correct.
And the Baralt interview was not tape recorded, correct?
That's correct.
And then when you finished interviewing them, was Eric then brought down?
Yes.
And
no, that's not correct.
What happened before?
Before Eric came down, we were still interviewing Mr. and Mrs. Baralt, and Lyle had driven up with a friend.
And did he walk into the house and see you and your partner sitting in the living room?
Yes.
And did you at that point indicate you wanted to speak with him?
Yes.
Did he indicate any reluctance in doing so?
No.
Did his friend stay there during the interview, or did he leave?
His friend went to another portion of the house.
And how about Eric? Where was he during the...
As far as I know, Eric was either still asleep or taking a shower or getting ready for the interview.
So is it basically true that as soon as Lyle came into the house, he sat down with you and began this interview?
Shortly after he came into the house, yes.
And did you tell him it was going to be tape recorded? In other words, this was not a hidden recording device or anything of that nature?
That's correct. Tape recorder is placed on the coffee table in front of the three of us.
And he indicated no reluctance in having it tape recorded at that time?
He indicated none, no.
And during the period of time that you were interviewing him, did Eric come down?
I believe so, yes.
And was he listening to what Lyle was saying, or did he just kind of come and go?
I don't think there was that much of an overlap as far as time's concerned.
And then when you finished with Lyle, the tape recorder went off and you then began another interview with Eric at that point?
Yes.
Because I noticed at the end of the interview, Lyle says to you, you're asking him about, he makes a statement about Eric's gang-related thing, and then he says, well, I don't know. Ask Eric if he'd be honest. I asked Eric if he'd be honest with me, very open with me about everything, and we're close. Do you remember that statement?
Yes.
And was he basically referring you to Eric about this gang-related thing?
Yes.
You had been talking about? By the way, the gang-related thing, which is referred to a couple of times in here, related to an incident that occurred in Calabasas in 1988, correct? Or thereabouts?
That's correct.
And had you been informed that the gang-related thing related to some incident that Eric Menendez had gotten himself into where a couple gang members had attacked him?
Yes.
You had learned that through checking for a police report out in Calabasas and discovering that, in fact, that had taken place?
Yes, that's correct.
And that's what's being referred to here, the gang-related thing.
Yes.
Was the possibility that the same gang that had attacked him might be involved in the killings themselves?
It was something to investigate, yes.
All right. And you had in your possession the police report at that time, where you had read the police report concerning that?
I believe so, yes.
And according to the transcript that you have in front of you and that the jury just looked at, Lyle basically referred you to Eric about that incident, correct?
That's correct.
Now, at page 19 of the transcript, do you have that there in front of you?
I do.
I think you make a statement along the lines of, that's all from somebody from either paid somebody off in the coroner's office. As far as we know, of course, we trust them as far as we trust anybody. But, they initially came out and said, oh, it looks like an OC death and so on and so forth. What were you referring to there?
The manner of the deaths. As far as I remember, the coroner's office put out the number of shots, wounds to each victim, and then I believe gave their opinion of what they thought, who was involved in it.
In other words, the coroner's office had issued a press release indicating their opinion that it was an organized crime hit, or words along those lines?
To what I remember, that's correct.
All right, and then you also make reference in the next couple of pages, right around page 19, to a lot of media attention that was being paid to the case, correct?
Correct.
And is it true that the media attention you were referring to was the coroner's theory that it was an organized crime hit, and the speculation that was going on in the media about that possibility?
I don't know whether that's what started it or not, but I know the press took off with that idea.
Okay, and there's mention at page 22 of the transcript of a person by the name of Noel Bloom. And your statement is, the news people have probably 100 investigative reporters that go out and they talk to Noel Bloom. You see that statement?
Yes.
And is that in reference to the fact that the media, there was some speculation in the media about whether a person by the name of Noel Bloom was connected with organized crime and may have been somehow connected to the killings?
Yes.
Again, these are theories that were being bantered about in the media when
That's
you were
correct.
investigating the case. And you were trying to assure Lyle in this interview of September 17th that you weren't responsible for generating that kind of publicity, basically, correct?
That's correct.
And is it true that that whole discussion about the media and what they were releasing and what the coroner was putting out there got going because Lyle seemed concerned about privacy, about keeping whatever happened private?
Yes, as indicated by one of his statements about what was released and his grandmother overhearing it or reading about it.
Okay. Page 14. There's a statement at line 13 by your partner in your presence. And your partner says, you said the day we were there, the morning you were there, you said that you slept up on the bed in the upstairs bedroom. Do you know what's being referred to there in terms of when you had a prior contact with Lyle Menendez?
I believe it was a statement that he made to Sergeant Edmonds.
The statement he made to Sergeant Edmonds or the statement he made to you at the scene when I think you testified before you saw both Eric and Lyle come back to the house on the morning of the 21st?
I don't recall him saying that statement that morning. So he didn't make it in my presence.
Okay.
I assumed it was during the interview with Detective Sergeant Edmonds.
But your partner is saying the day we were there, the morning you were there, as if he's referring to the two of you being somewhere in the presence of Lyle Menendez, right? Would you agree that that appears to be the context? That
It appears so, yes.
Okay, but you just have no recollection of
That's correct.
that. All right. And at page 20, lines 24 and 25, there's a statement by you. You were there later when the TV crews and all. What does that refer to?
That refers to either when he came at 5:30 in the morning or 8:30 in the morning and the news crew was going up and down the street filming anybody that would move, basically.
And that would have been the morning of the 21st, correct?
That's correct.
You testified about your contact with him before, I think. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes.
It's true, is it not, that as a result of that contact, you personally had some suspicions as early as the morning of August 21st? Suspicions of Lyle and Eric as possible suspects?
I think at that point there was nobody that wasn't suspicious.
But in your mind, their demeanor on that morning raised some suspicions in you, correct?
That's correct.
All right, and you still had those suspicions on September 17th when you conducted this interview, correct?
Correct.
There were several other theories that were being pursued, but one of your theories was that they were possibly involved.
I don't think that would be a true statement. They were under suspicion.
Okay. Page 20. Lines 18 through 21. Is that Lyle who says, I don't believe the organized crime thing until I see something?
That's correct.
And then you say that makes two of us, and your partner says makes three of us. We haven't seen any of it, correct?
That's correct.
And then on page 31, he says at the bottom of the page at line 22, trying to teach us the value of money, but there were lots of fights. Is there any particular reason why you didn't follow up on that comment? That there were lots of fights between him and his father?
I thought it was clear that he had lots of fights about the money issue, spending money.
Okay. And on page 30, according to the transcript, you make a statement, your dad seems to like older women. Your dad seems to think that they were, and then he makes a statement. Is that correct?
I don't think that's correct, no.
What do you think you said there?
The inference of the conversation was that the girls that I previously mentioned in reference to Lyle were older women, and that his father didn't like Lyle seeing older women.
So when the transcript says your dad seems to like older women, you're probably saying there your dad seems not to like older women?
Not to like you with older women.
All right, and that was information you had obtained from the women themselves that you mentioned on the previous page. That is Jamie, Christy, and Charlene.
Not
I
necessarily.
would have picked that as being hearsay.
Not necessarily with speaking with them in person, but about them.
Okay. And on page 27, Lyle says that he met with a banker. Was there some reason why you didn't ask him who the banker was? Why you weren't interested in that?
Where are you referring to as far
This is line 6.
For what I remember, the context of the statement, it was just a statement in passing. I didn't really think that he was actually seeing a banker. That was my impression at the time, I believe.
All right, and then on page 26, line 24, there's a statement that says he's very confident. And it sounded to me like he was saying he's very powerful. Do you remember which one it was?
I don't. Can I just read a few lines so
Sure,
I get the
go
context,
ahead.
please? Your question again, please.
Is whether he is saying there he's very powerful as opposed to what it does say he's very confident.
I don't recall.
Now, at some point, you question him about hiring bodyguards, correct?
That's correct.
And he says to you at page 32, line 23, some security people felt that one of them was FBI. Do you recall that statement?
Yes.
And you then asked him who the security people were that that the company had hired, correct?
I'm not sure whether I asked him. I just asked him who had hired. I don't think I said who the company had hired.
He told you the company had hired him and that he had not continued with them because it was too expensive. He wasn't going to pay for it.
That's correct.
And the company had stopped paying for it.
That's what he said. That's correct.
And he then gave you the name of the security company was D.B. Kelly, correct?
That's correct.
And based on him giving you that name, you then went and did some further investigation and spoke to Mr. Wenskowski, who testified here.
I don't know whether I had spoken to him before that or after that.
And did you also speak to a driver, a limo driver or a security driver who indicated to you that he had stated to Wenskowski that there was an FBI, he suspected there was an FBI person following him around?
Objection calls for hearsay.
You did interview Mr. Wenskowski, though?
That's correct.
And based on information he gave to you, did you interview a person named Richie who is a limo driver?
Yes.
And based on information that you obtained from him, did you feel you had corroboration of the statement of Lyle's that a limo driver had said something about an FBI person following him?
Objection calls for hearsay still.
Now, based on the content of this tape, did you feel that Lyle was trying to pretend that it was an organized crime hit based on the statements he made to you?
No.
In fact, he was indicating just the opposite, wasn't he?
That's correct.
And at any point in time, did you ask him if there was anything missing from the house?
I know that the issue of the camera came up, the video camera. And I don't know whether it was during this time or not. I believe it was.
Was there anything that he said to you that made you think he was trying to make you feel that a burglary had taken place and that there was lots of property missing?
No, he just indicated that the video camera was missing.
On page 33, line 14, that part of the transcript or the tape is hard to hear, but you're making a statement about, sounds like he was very serious, but the hospital wanted to talk to him while we were in New York, and he wouldn't speak to us because he was in the hospital, said he was sick. Who are you referring to there?
I don't recall his name. He was the prior owner of Strawberries, which is a record company that the company that Jose was in bought out.
Was that Morris Levy?
Yes.
By any chance?
Yes.
Okay, so you had gone to a hospital in New York, and that was basically a lead you were following up from this organized crime information that was in the media?
We wanted to talk to him, and we found out that he was in the hospital. We phoned the hospital to see whether we could interview him, and he denied us access to come to the hospital for an interview.
Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
I have one question. Detective Zoeller, you indicated that when Lyle Menendez came to the house that he had a friend with him. Do you remember that?
Yes.
You know who the friend was?
Yes, I do.
Who was it?
Greg Guest.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Can we approach this for 1 second? Detective Zoeller, I just had a couple more questions. Is it true that after you got done talking to Eric Menendez, well, let me back up. After you got done with your interview with Lyle, you then had a separate interview with Eric Menendez, correct?
That's correct.
And was Lyle out of the room during that time period?
Yes, he was.
Did there come a time when, near the end of your interview with Eric Menendez, where he walked back into the room?
Yes.
And at that time, did you and your partner have a further discussion with him about the Rolex watch that you had questioned him about earlier in the interview?
Yes.
And at that time, did you, without going into it in detail, basically indicate to him, caution him not to wear the watch when he was in LA because people often got robbed of Rolex watches?
Yes.
And at that time, did you tell him that people who rob those watches often sell them for $2,500?
Yes.
And in response to that statement by you or your partner, did he say something to the effect of, oh yeah, where could I sell mine for $2,500?
Yes, that's correct.
That's all I have. Thank you.
At the time that you had the conversation with Lyle Menendez about the Rolex watch, was he wearing it?
Yes, he was.
And do you remember what color it was? Was it silver or gold?
It was gold.
Thank you.
Anything else?
No.
Okay, thank you. And at this point, we'll take our recess. We have some people in the jury room you might have heard who want to get out. And you folks take your break, and we'll resume at 25 minutes to the hour. Don't discuss this case with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it. And you can return to your jury room, and then when we're all set, we'll have you come in.